help from any of you. Not after what I'd done. Not with what you all were going through. I know that every one of you would have dropped everything if I'd asked, but I couldn't. He tried to remember if he could feel her bump when he'd hugged her. He tried to remember if he'd looked her in the eyes. He tried to remember if he'd given her any real thought at all before she left. It had happened here. That had happened to her here. He'd probably been a mile away the whole time. Stop it, she said. I can't, he told her. Have you ever talked to anyone about this, she asked. No, I'd never tell anyone anything you tell me, he promised. She shook her head. I mean this. Your thing. The fact that you're about to steal a horse just so you can carry me away on it. He chuckled in spite of himself. No. I think maybe you should, she told him gently. It's a lot to put on yourself. I am not, I've never been your responsibility. That sounds a lot like you still not knowing when to ask for help, he deflected. You're representing me in my divorce and I'm living in your guest house, she volleyed back. Don't ask me not to feel something about this, he told her. It's insulting to me. I don't want to insult you, she stroked his cheek, her hand falling to his chest where her fingertips pressed lightly. You're just carrying a lot already and I don't want you burdened unnecessarily. I want you to protect yourself. From you, he wondered. She nodded, maybe. She smiled then, removing her hand from him and flopped back against the back of the couch. Or maybe I just think everyone needs therapy to feel better about me going. Oh no, I definitely need therapy, he teased. A small smile came on her face and she turned to look at him. Her soft, golden hair had spilled over his hand, her head resting against his forearm. Would you and the boys like to come over for dinner tonight, she asked. He must have seemed surprised, and she said, a blush running up her cheeks, I don't like the thought of this being how we leave it today. He didn't either. It was somewhat strange how in line their thought processes were. Him not wanting to discuss this at home, her not wanting this to be what the day it was about. There was a desire on both their parts for compartmentalization, to the extent that it was possible. It was a little like how they both understood how much easier it was to choose well for your kids than for yourself. Or not really like that, at all, except they'd both learned it for themselves. Will's done with football practice at 6, if you don't mind him, Stinky, we can be there at 6:15, he noted. She smiled, her nose scrunching, the stinkier the better. That boy can do no wrong in my book. I'll rub extra dirt on him, he promised. Can I bring anything tonight? She shook her head. Your boy's okay with chicken stir-fry. He nodded, but aren't you and Joey vegetarians? That kitchen of yours has 2 pans, she told him. Fancy, he agreed, not bothering to tell her they could go vegetarian for a night because he would bet she already bought the chicken. He then wondered, how'd they make it past Sangza? I distracted her with that really awful brown vase, she told him. He chuckled. Can you believe she claimed it slipped? What a knucklehead. She grinned. Oh, she'll take that story to her grave. She patted his leg and stood up. See you at 6:15. He stayed seated on the couch as she walked back over to his desk and picked up her bag, slinging her coat over her arm. He should have let her leave, but whatever she said, he had a responsibility. And so did she. Hey, he stopped her just as she got to the door. She turned to look at him. He glanced briefly at his desk, where the phone she'd given him sat. There anything on that the police need to know about? She let out a breath, probably. Then said, I wasn't sure where the line was, and I didn't want to bother anyone or be seen as, I don't know. Melodramatic. Yeah, he nodded because it didn't take much to guess where that fear came from. Okay. I'll tell you after I go through it. Does he know where you are? She smiled sadly. He knew that the minute I told him I was leaving. See you later. Theirs was his last meeting of the day, so he checked his inbox and responded to a few emails. Then he returned the calls of a few people he tended to avoid. After that he straightened up his desk. Then he called Lewis in for a random chat, which apparently wasn't something that he did often because halfway through he had to assure him he wasn't being fired. What he really did, was procrastinate. The phone was glaring at him the whole time. He knew that he had to do it. He was seeing the judge tomorrow. He went through the text messages first. There were the usual threats that he would bring to the police, that he would show to the judge. But they were so bombastic yet banal, that they almost lost their meaning. There were ones that didn't, though. Ones that snagged in his mind, that churned his stomach, that made him wonder how old she had been the first time he'd said them to her. At least when you were younger you could get by on your looks, but we both know they aren't what they used to be. Why would anyone want a 30-something loser who's never done anything for herself? I should have fucked you and chucked you a long time ago. And one that now, knowing what he knew, had made him risk everything by chucking the phone. You couldn't even give me a son, you worthless little bitch. Isn't that what you princesses are made for? He had abused her into losing a child and now was taunting her with it, blaming her for it. He picked up his own phone and called John. "What's up?" John asked. It was the way he always answered the phone during the workday. As though to say, get to the point. So he did. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "Hold on," John said. He heard John put him on speakerphone and get up and close the door to his office. He put his phone on speaker too, leaning back and rubbing his face. "What do you mean you can't do this?" John asked. "Do you think the case is UN?" "No," he interrupted, "if anything. It's winnable. It's really winnable." "Well then fucking win it," John told him. Jay. "No, listen to me. You're a great lawyer, everyone knows that. That's not why she came to you. She could have hired anyone. She trusts you," he told him. "Well, maybe she shouldn't," he reasoned. "I'm not. I don't want to win in court. I want to go down there and drown him. I want to set him on fire. I want to beat him to death with my bare fucking hands." John was silent for a long moment and he sat there in the depth of what he was feeling. She was right about the horse. The idea of having her in the same room as him, facing all the vitriol opposing counsel was going to throw at her. It made his blood boil. "Well, you can't," John told him, adding in a tone of annoyance, "according to Sangza, anyway." He closed his eyes and smirked, somehow feeling better that clearly John felt the same way. Otherwise, he might have thought he was going crazy. "We all want him gone, we all want her better," John went on. "You're the only one of us who can actually do something to make that happen." He tried to think of how he wanted to say it. "It's my job to think clearly and I'm not." "Look at your computer," John told him. "Don't argue, just do it." He looked at his computer. "Now look to the left or the right, until you find a drawing of the woods." He swallowed thickly as his eyes landed on the drawing that Joey had made for him, in a place of pride on his desk, right next to the mug JJ had made for him at a birthday party once, and the little pottery piece that had Will's handprints in them, a picture of Kitty at her 4th birthday. He looked at the colors in the trees, the ones she'd gone outside to get just right. He thought about the note on the back, telling him he was always invited. The kiss to his cheek. Her sweet little laugh that was growing stronger and less self-conscious every time he saw her. Every moment she spent away from her father. "There's your clarity," John told him. "Yeah," he agreed. Though he wasn't sure he did really. If he was aiming for objectivity, Joey was not the path forward. "How do you think she would feel if I brought someone else on?" "Not Bolton," John said immediately. "No," he agreed, "I was thinking Castle." "I didn't think custody was his specialty," John noted. "He dealt mostly in domestic violence, and even if that's not what she wants to go after him for, it's going to be a big part of the case, and I want someone who knows," he told him. "You know," John pointed out. He sighed, "Look, man, do whatever you think you need to do. But if you involve Castle, you know you're not just getting additional counsel, you're getting a babysitter." "Maybe that's what I need," he suggested. "She told me I needed therapy." John chuckled. "She's not wrong there." He was silent for another moment and he said, "But maybe that's a bit of a her thing too. Think about what's going on in her mind right now. She came back here because she knows we all care, but she spent so many years hearing that we didn't. Hearing it was pathetic to think that we would. Maybe she's still a little more convinced she thinks she is. Maybe she's trying to protect herself." "You need to protect yourself." "From you?" "From me," he wondered. "Maybe." "Yeah, maybe," John agreed, "or I don't know. Maybe just, from hope." Notes. TW, descriptions of past physical and verbal abuse, evidence of verbal abuse, discussion of a miscarriage. Hello to those who made it thus far. The next chapter will be significantly lighter, with dinner with the kiddos, and I think will also include their first meeting with Castle. I absolutely don't want this story to center around the abuse, but there have been a lot of questions both inside the fic and from those reading it that I wanted to address. On the whole, after this chapter, there will be a lot less of a focus on it, now that he knows. Chapter 9. Summary. Thank you to everyone who commented on the last chapter. I will go and respond to them all, but I have a friend staying with me and really wanted to get this uploaded. I hope everyone is still enjoying this. No idea how this chapter got so long, but started making it, had a breakdown, bon appetit. Chapter text. He stood with the other parents, waiting for football practice to finish up. They were all on the sidelines, some had come right from work like he had, others had stayed all through practice. He could remember his dad standing where he was now, dressed in his suit like he was now. Even if his legs were burning, he'd make sure to run hard that last few minutes, harder maybe than he'd run all practice. It was a night that demanded nostalgia, even from someone like him who didn't miss those days. The sun had gone down an hour earlier, bringing along what appeared to be the first cold night of the year. The field emerged out of the darkness thanks to the stadium lights, glaring and bathing all at once. There was a subtle mist around them, echoed in the hearty breaths leaving the players. He could remember what it felt like to be them. Knowing that he had a family dinner and then homework to do. Beating himself up for every mistake he made while his siblings bickered through dinner. An ability creating a sense responsibility, even for something as low stakes as a middle school football league. Maybe Ursula was right, and he did need therapy. Strong team this year, one of the fathers he didn't know said to him. Yep, looks like it, he agreed in that curt way that fathers got away with, that mothers never seemed to. The coach blew the whistle, 2 quick pops, and he watched as the kids let themselves go. Their shoulders slumped and their helmets immediately pulled off. They clumped together in groups of 2s or 3s. He watched as a few of them crowded around Will, a sheepish smile on his face as he hustled away from them, throwing goodbyes behind him. His coach cupped the back of his head briefly as he was heading towards his things, saying something low in his ear. Will nodded and the coach patted his back and released him. Once Will had taken off his pads and grabbed his bag, he came over, gulping down his water bottle, his helmet still in his other hand. Hey Dad, he greeted him, offering that one-armed hug that he'd had to get used to, where he just sort of leaned his head in his general direction. He took his bag from him and slung it over his shoulder, wrapping his other arm around Will's as they headed towards the parking lot. Good day, he asked him. Will took another gulp of water, and nodded. I got a 93 on my social studies test. Well done, he ruffled his hair, you were nervous about that one too. The bonus question saved me, Will said. I would have gotten an 83 if not. Most of the class did really bad. He'd always heard that when a student did poorly it was their fault, when a whole class did it was the teacher's. In this case he wasn't so sure. Will's teacher had said at parent night that with the kids in 6th grade, he was going to consciously push them. He'd said it begrudgingly, explaining that with the university landscape so competitive, some schools were going back so far as to 7th and 8th grade, and as a result the rigor of those years took a pretty drastic leap now. It was ridiculous to think that Will's future could be based on how he did in school a year from now. So we're going to redo the unit kind of, Will went on, it'll be pretty boring. Worth it to make sure everyone understands though, he suggested. That's true, Will agreed. Maybe next time I'll get over 100. It was another way his children were different. JJ loved to win in games, Will loved to win against himself. They were both competitive, but their extroverted and introverted natures took hold everywhere. Why stop there, he mused, why not 200? Will smirked, seems braggy. He chuckled, good point. They got to his car and he set Will's bag in the trunk, Will putting in his helmet. He waved to a few of the parents and then they were in the car, trying to navigate their way out of the parking lot. All the camaraderie from before people got in their cars didn't last once they were in them, growing impatient to end the day, get kids home, showered, and fed. What are we having for dinner? Will asked. Chicken stir-fry, he told him as he finally got them out and onto the road. We're going to go to Ursula's. Cool Will nodded. His stomach let out a deep, angry rumble and he half giggled half chuckled. That sounds good. He chuckled and Will asked, is that gonna be like a thing we do a lot? Having dinner with Ursula and Joey, he clarified. Yeah, Will agreed. I don't know, he told him, I mean, not all the time but probably. Why? Is that a problem? Just curious, Will told him. Then suggested, she's kind of weird. He had thought it was JJ who would have to be convinced on Joey. Will had taken to her so well. It had been so nice to see Joey playing with the other kids on Saturday, with Will there to be her guardrail, always deflecting JJ or Kitty if they got too wild for her. Joey, he asked, wondering how he could ask what had changed. What? Will asked, no, I mean Ursula. Ursula, he said, finding that even odder. Weird how? Will shrugged, I don't know. Not in a bad way. She's really nice. She's just like, silly. Like that whole thing with the music, you know. They're just driving to school but I don't know how to describe it. She's just kind of weird, Rob supplied. He understood it a little more now. Weird as a catch-all for anything that couldn't quite be made sense of. He couldn't blame Will for not understanding Ursula. He was struggling with that a bit himself. Yeah, maybe Will agreed. Or I dunno. I do like her though. Just so you know. Okay, he said warily, that's good. Dad, can I ask you something? Will ventured. He was afraid Will was going to ask again about him dating her. A few times on Saturday he'd felt his eldest son's eyes on him when he was talking to her. Of course he allowed. She left Joey's dad, right? Will asked. It would have been jarring to hear his son say something like that so point blank, but more parents than not in his year were various kinds of divorced / separated / never been married. With his career, too, Will had absorbed some of it. Plus, him and Roslyn. Yeah, she did, he agreed. Will was silent for a moment and then said, but she brought Joey with her. It died on his tongue just in time. He caught it right as it was leaving his lips. The obvious answer, and the wrong one. Of course, he'd almost said, to the child whose mother had left him behind. Damn it, Roslyn, he'd thought not for the first or 100th time, and damn you. He tried not to hold a lot of anger towards her, it was unhealthy and unhelpful. But it was there, he knew that. It was there when Sangza brought over an extra sheet of brownies for the bake sale he'd forgotten about. It was there when he watched JJ look yearningly at her as she held Kitty in her arms. When he saw Will try to best himself again and again. Yeah, baby, he agreed, she did. Because he's not a good man. Just like you said, he's the villain in her story. She would have taken her anyway, Will told him firmly. She's that kind of mom. He reached over and squeezed his shoulder, as much as he wanted to comfort him, he wasn't going to invalidate what he was feeling either. The urge was to make it all better, but he couldn't fix it by pretending it hadn't happened. She is, he agreed. I think maybe that's why she's like that with Joey. You know. Making even a trip to school an adventure. I think she tried to make fun wherever she could for her. She's been doing it all on her own for a really long time. Like you, Will mused, and he swallowed. You do it too. He pulled down his driveway and tried to find a way not to burst into tears that would surely either terrify or embarrass Will. Are you calling me silly? He asked him. Will grinned and he poked him, home. You calling me silly, boy? You're more goofy. Will suggested just as he stopped the car. Will immediately opened the door and Rob said, oh yeah, you better run. With that Will sprinted out of the car, and he bucked himself up and chased after him. It was harder than it should have been, catching up to him, but he got him, lifting him off the ground in the bear hug he'd been denied at the field. To the victors, the spoils. They went inside and he relieved the boy's nanny. JJ hadn't yet learned the one-arm hug thing and launched himself at him, telling him all about his day. What's for dinner? He asked, his arms around his neck. Is someone starving you boys that I don't know about? He asked. Will chuckled, we're growing. He smirked and looked into JJ's happy face, we're going to Ursula's. Yes, JJ pumped his fist, wait. Dad. Make her sing. No. Make her be the demons. No. He laughed, maybe let's have dinner before we demand a show. It's so good. JJ smiled, she likes my Had's impression. She says it has, a P word. Potential, he guessed. JJ scrunched his nose and shook his head, possibilities. They grabbed Grey Wind and started walking over. JJ made him and Will guess more. Power. Will suggested, which was a good one. No. JJ said in annoyance. Calm down, buddy, we weren't there. He chuckled. JJ looked towards the heavens as though he'd been cursed with dullards in his family tree. When they got to the guest house though he ran up the front stairs, Grey Wind coming after him, and knocked on the door. A moment later Myrcella opened it. Stark boys. You ha ha. JJ returned. What does my Had's impression have? Panache. Myrcella supplied with a grin, her arms dancing as they spread wide to punctuate, real panache. JJ turned back to them with his hands on his hips and he shook his head, never would have guessed it in a million years, kid. Grey Wind had already let himself in, but Myrcella stepped back, holding the door open to let JJ go in. He pushed Will forward gently, who gave a light wave to her. She returned it with one of her own, reaching out to stroke his hair as he was walking by before seeming to think better of it and dropping her hand. Hey, thanks for coming. She smiled at him. Thanks for having us, he said, sniffing, it smells good. His stomach rumbled and she giggled. Someone is apparently starving all of us. She shook her head, not on my watch, come on. He followed her into the house, closing the door behind him. Looking around, already it felt like there's coats of every color hanging on the hooks at the front door. Joey's backpack next to Myrcella's handbag on the bench, shoes tidily underneath it. Joey came over to him when they got into the main room, Grey Wind behind her and beside her and in front of her all at once, trying to get all of their attention. Hi Rob, she smiled, giggling as Grey Wind sniffed her ear. Hi honey. He reached down and stroked both their heads, subtly trying to push Grey Wind away from her. Will you sit next to me, she asked. I'd love to. He smiled at her, to himself. Sure, he didn't have a lot of competition here tonight, but with two boys of his own and a niece he knew what a compliment that question was. I'm just going to go help your mommy, okay, he said, but you pick out the best seats for us. She giggled, okay. He stroked her hair again, trying not to think about it. There was something that had been weighing on him ever since Myrcella had left his office. The night of the funeral, Joey was there. The three of them were staying at a hotel. He imagined it was a suite, but even still. What had happened to her when Myrcella had to go to the hospital? She would have been 3 years old at the time. He tried to picture her then, a little cherub under bad fluorescent lighting. He wondered if that was the night she'd learned not to trust men, or if that had happened long before. If that was the night, then had she had to sit with him all the while not understanding where her mother was, but knowing enough to be afraid of the one man who was supposed to protect them both from everything. He couldn't think about that, not here. The point of this was to separate things, not dwell on them. He released her and went into the kitchen area where things were sizzling, spreading delicious smells. Hey, Myrcella smiled, using 2 spatulas to nudge at the separate pans. Is your crew good with just water? I should have got soda but. You should not have, he corrected her. She smiled and he saw a pitcher on the counter. Want me to fill that up? Oh, that would be great, thanks, she nodded. He felt her eyes on him as he grabbed the pitcher and went first to the freezer to put some ice in. He wasn't sure exactly why she was watching him, but it made him very self-conscious of his technique. Joey asked me to sit next to her, he told her. She laughed, and you haven't called John to brag? He'd be so sour about it all. Dude, hollow victory, I'm not even there, he offered in his best John impression. That cracked her up, beckoning his own laugh. Wait, say Sansa in that voice. I think you mean Sansa, he offered. Ah, she laughed, like John, babe, we love you, but that's not your wife's name. He chuckled, how dare you? She grinned at him and he set the pitcher down on the counter. Hey, sorry to. I know we don't want to talk about all that here, he said. She turned to look at him more fully and he said, there's just something I want to run by you that's a bit more time sensitive. Oh, okay, she agreed and then asked, is this about my phone? He shook his head. No, no. We don't have to talk about that. I sent some things on to a buddy of mine at the station, though. So you're all set there? She nodded. Okay. Thank you. So what is it? I want to bring someone else onto the case, he told her. She looked at him for a moment and then turned back to the stove, turning both burners off. She dug the spatulas against the bottoms of the pans, releasing every last bit of vegetables that had gotten stuck. Would you stay on? She asked, not looking at him. Yes, yeah, of course, he promised. How can you accuse me of having a savior complex and then think I'd abandon you? She didn't look at him and he smoothed his hand over the top of her back, gripping her shoulder, because he knew exactly how she could think that. Sorry. No, she shook her head. That's a really fair question. My mind shouldn't be able to do that, trick me. He squeezed her shoulder again, and she looked over at him. Can I ask why? Honestly, he asked. Always, she said. I think you're right, and we could use a little objectivity, he told her. I could. Her eyes widened slightly and she nodded. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings. He shook his head. No, what you said was fair. And I don't. I refuse to make mistakes with this. He already had. After speaking with John, he'd called Castle. Before he broached it with Ursula, he wanted to make sure that he was available. He didn't want her to lose faith in him and not have a solution for it. The man was as brusque as he'd ever been, a friend of his father's. He immediately made him feel like a child. That had only been intensified by their conversation. So what is it? What is what? What's the worst thing they are going to throw at us? He had been silent for a moment. Long enough. You haven't even asked, have you? He's so clearly in the wrong. I'm not sure this is going to be one of those cases. For fuck's sake, boy, you and I both know it's always one of those cases. She smiled softly. Okay. Yeah, whoever you want. He nodded. Okay, we're meeting with the judge, me and opposing counsel, tomorrow morning. Can you come to my office around noon and meet Castle? Sure, she agreed. He's tough, he warned. Good, she smiled. She turned back to the stove. So are you, though. He let his hand drop, only just realizing he was still touching her, and turned towards the counter. She'd made a salad too, in case her and Joey weren't getting enough vegetables, and rice. He picked a piece of cucumber out of the salad. What do you do to this dressing? He asked. I love it, she told him. His eyes moved back to her in time to catch her smiling softly. It was a night made for nostalgia, as he'd thought. Memories of his father standing at the grill, telling him to love the meat. Theon making jokes of condolence for his mom. She got it too, though. When John's mom didn't understand why her pot roast didn't come out the same, she'd say, because you didn't love it. A slow smile came onto his face. Yeah, that's it. Their gaze held a moment longer, reminding him of something he'd forgotten about her. Or something he'd chosen to, anyway. That she never let you feel alone in something. He was the one who looked away, picking a pepper out and chewing it more thoughtfully than necessary, and nodded. Excuse me, she said as she gently moved him out of the way to grab a serving bowl. He was wondering how much he could get away with stealing out of the salad bowl when he saw Ursula's hold on one of the pans wobble. In slow motion he watched as she went to steady it with her other hand. Whoa, no, he stopped her. He grabbed a dish towel thankfully in real time and pressed his covered hand to the body of the pan, his other steadying hers. Thank you, she said, her eyes closing briefly. I'm such an idiot. No, he shook his head. Normal human reaction. Do you want me to? Thanks, she said again, her hand slipping from underneath his. He poured the stir-fry into the bowl, realizing where the problem was. The handle is wobbly. She had been looking down at her feet and looked up at him. I'm sorry. The handle. He brought the pan over to the sink. It's wobbly. It wasn't your fault, is what he wanted to say. And even if it had been, who cares? It was the second time he'd bitten his tongue just in time tonight. Oh, she nodded, tucking some hair behind her ear. I'm just going to start bringing stuff to the table. Would you mind doing the other one, just in case? He nodded and she grabbed the salad bowl. He heard her voice change and the boys laugh at whatever she'd said. The other pan was smaller, the vegetable only one for her and Joey. He put it into the bowl she'd set out, grabbing it and the rice and bringing it over to the table. Serving spoons. Marcella held her finger up and then went to go grab them. This is the best one. Joey gestured to a chair. He grinned, so you're going to sit there, huh? No, she giggled, it's for you. For me, he clarified, I'm honored. Then glanced at the boys, why don't you go wash your hands? Come on, I'll give you a boost, Will said to Joey, nudging her gently. She followed them happily as Marcella came back. Hand-washing adventure. He pointed his thumb back at the kids. Group activity, for sure, she grinned. They made plates for the kids, and then themselves. So, noon tomorrow? Marcella asked as she sat down. Yeah, he took his seat, that all right? She nodded, I have an appointment at 10, but it'll be done before then. The kids came back and took their seats, the boys digging in immediately. Marcella smiled as she watched them start to shovel it in their mouths. Joey in comparison looked like a little lady with her napkin in her lap and her sensibly sized forkful. Actually it's an interview. He looked back at Marcella, an interview. She nodded, a blush running up her cheeks, and then shook her head. It's no big deal, just there's this gallery downtown. Not too far from your office actually, I passed by it on my way there last week and popped in. They need some help. Oh, he said, that'd be great. Part-time. That blush deepened and he clarified, so you can keep your afternoons with this one. Joey turned to him with a hummy expression. He swiped his thumb against the side of her mouth where there was some sauce. Yes, Marcella agreed, that's why. Who would want a 30-something loser who's never done anything for herself? He looked back at her and nodded, makes perfect sense. It did, really. He could understand why she wanted a job. Something to keep her busy, even if she didn't need the money. Though he had to imagine it had something to do with Gaudry, too. Making her feel useless, when he'd probably been the one who hadn't wanted her to work. Joey, though, wouldn't be ready for a nanny. This is so good, Marcella, JJ told her, I like what is this? Marcella turned to him, a smile on her face, and looked at his fork. Broccoli. It's so good, JJ sighed. Are you kidding me? He asked. JJ looked at him. You never eat broccoli. Well, this tastes different, JJ told him. You can say it, he said. JJ grinned, it tastes better. He and Will chuckled and he looked over at Marcella, but she was looking at Joey. Her daughter's eyes were wide, and they panned over to him. I bet you'd like my broccoli, he mused. A small smile came on her face and she nodded but didn't say anything, scooping up another bite. So how are you liking school, Joey? He asked. I love it, she gushed. His grin widened. Oh yeah. That's great. What's your favorite part? She looked over at Marcella, a question in her eyes. Go on, Marcella urged her, a laugh in her voice, tell him. Joey turned back to him and told him, half sheepish half proud, recess. He chuckled, a girl after my own heart. That was mine too. He held up his hand for a high five and she slapped hers against it gently, or art class. Oh, yeah, actually Rob, there's something I wanted to ask you after dinner, Marcella said, will you remind me? Sure, Will deadpanned. Marcella laughed in surprise, thank you. Then asked him, how was football practice? Good, fine, he said, I sort of messed up in one of the drills. Is that what the coach was saying to you after? He asked. Yeah, Will nodded and then asked Marcella, could I have some more, please? Of course. Marcella took his plate and scooped another healthy portion of stir-fry and rice onto his plate. That's such a nice thing about practice. Thanks, Will said and then asked, what do you mean? Marcella shrugged, I don't know. I guess it just seems kind of cool that there's a spot of time specifically made for trying. To just get to play without worrying about winning. Yeah, Will nodded, I guess that is kind of cool. I don't know, still stinks screwing up though. You think that's bad, Marcella said, at least you've got a crowd around you. When I used to rehearse ballet it was just me and the mirrors. There were so many of me all messing up at once. But no one else saw your mistake, Will suggested. No, but I did, Marcella said, and that's what mattered to me. Yeah, Will agreed. She shrugged, besides, I bet everyone else was so focused on their own mistakes, or what they are having for dinner, or whether to ask out the hot girl in their gym class that they didn't even notice. Will chuckled, yeah maybe. Who is the hot girl in your gym class? JJ asked. What? Will asked blushing, no one. Well I bet some people, Joey suggested. They all turned to look at her, all that running around. It gets you so gross. That's a good point, Joey. He tried not to laugh. It didn't work and they all lost it. She joined in, seemingly convinced that they weren't laughing at her. Dinner went on like that. He and the boys each had 2 helpings and a bit more. Ursula had thought she'd be sending leftovers home with them, but there were none to be had. JJ was eyeing Joey's uneaten vegetables with the impressive concentration Grey Wind exhibited whenever he was eating bacon. There was still a bit of a divide between the two of them. They couldn't quite seem to fit. Thankfully they were nice to each other, but JJ focused most of his attention on Ursula, demanding it of her too, the two of them keeping up an ongoing side conversation amidst everything else. They were used to having dinners with John, Sansa and Kitty, and for a little while Ursula and Joey were a part of them, but this had its own rhythm. He'd invite them over sometime next week, though after the success of Ursula's stir-fry he was a little afraid of cooking for them. Besides, most of the things he made for him and the boys were pretty meat-forward. Mommy, Joey cut into his thoughts, can I please get up and pet Grey Wind? Grey Wind was a foot from the table. Actually less than, considering his paw was wrapped around one of the legs of Joey's chair. Ursula narrowed her eyes, did you eat enough dinner? Joey nodded. Will and JJ's eyes both went to Joey's unfinished plate, clearly assessing how quickly they could reach for it without alerting the other. All right, do we need a clean-up? Joey held up her hands, some salad dribbled. That silly salad. Ursula shook her head. She went into the kitchen and came back with a dish towel she'd dampened. Already, let's see those dribbles. She took Joey's hands one by one and wiped her hands. Whoop, you've got something here too. She dabbed Joey's cheek, oh no, and here. She rubbed the other one, oh and here. She swiped her forehead, oh and ever I wear e. With that she covered Joey's face with the towel, rubbing it. Joey was squirming and giggling. Will gave him a look as though to say, see what I mean, before grinning at Joey's peal of laughter. When Ursula removed the towel she inspected her face. Oh no, she sighed. Moo? Joey asked, clearly hoping so. Oh, I think just a little. Ursula agreed and then did it again. When she released her, Joey took her hand as she got off the chair, holding it to her cheek. Drooping a little. All right, baby, you can pet Grey Wind for a few minutes, but then we've got to get you ready for bed. Are you going to read to me or am I going to read to you tonight? Joey tugged on her hand and Ursula leaned down, letting her daughter whisper in her ear. Ursula glanced at him and mouthed, Will. At least he thought so anyway. He nodded, taking advantage of the parental right to volunteer one's children for things carte blanche. You can ask, okay? Ursula told her. Joey pulled away from her and went to go stand next to Will's chair. Will, she asked. He had successfully stolen her plate and was clearing it of food. Yeah, Joe. Would you maybe read to me? From the book of mythology that you let me borrow, she asked. Oh, Will cleared his throat. He glanced at him for permission and he nodded, so he said, yeah, of course. Why don't you go get into your pajamas and bring it down, okay baby? Ursula asked. Does 2 myths seem fair to everyone? Yes, Mommy, Joey agreed readily, heading upstairs with Grey Wind trailing after her. This time, Ursula didn't stop herself and stroked the back of Will's hair. He seemed surprised at first, and then pleased, and then like he was trying not to show that he was. You're a very sweet boy, Ursula told him, thank you. It's no problem, Will promised. What about me? JJ asked from across the table, a classic younger brother. Oh, you, my darling, Ursula crossed to him, you're sweet as sugar. No, JJ grinned, I mean my face. Ursula smiled in surprise, glancing over at him. He'd taken Joey's vacant chair and was fighting Will for some of her leftovers. He gave her a have at it expression. All right, let's see what we're working with, Ursula said, tilting JJ's head back. Oh my goodness, this is a doozy. With that she started to clean his face, then covered it in the towel, cupping it and rubbing it while making corresponding side effects. Let's see. She pulled the towel off, revealing his wide smile, oh not even close. She did it twice more, JJ's laughter getting louder and louder. When she deemed him clean enough, she grabbed his hands and cleaned those, pressing a kiss to his forehead. By the time that was done, Joey came downstairs in a pale blue nightgown, hilariously big slippers on her feet, holding the large book of mythology. Will brought her into the living room, JJ following along. The boys sat on the couch, but Joey grabbed one of the blankets Sansa had knit and got on the floor with Grey Wind. She leaned her back against his belly, tucking the blanket around her feet, making sure to ball a little bit of one corner up, pointing at it to Grey Wind so that he knew she'd made a pillow for him. He and Myrcella started clearing, bringing everything into the kitchen. She laughed at the carnage. "Next time I'll know to make more," she said. He grinned. "I think by anyone else's standards you made too much. Except Uncle Goblin, maybe." She laughed. "I really hope that sticks." He chuckled and turned on the faucet to start washing the dishes. Myrcella grabbed a Tupperware container and emptied the leftover salad into it. "Will you eat this?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "It'll be a bit soggy." "I will eat it," he nodded. "I can do that," she said, once she'd brought everything over to the sink. He shook his head. "I don't mind." "You wanted to ask me something." "Will was meant to remind you, but..." She smiled, leaning her back against the counter and setting the salad container down behind her. "No problem if not," she said, "but I was wondering if it'd be okay to put up some frames on the walls." His brow furrowed. "Yeah, of course." She looked slightly relieved and slightly chastened. "You are?" "I meant what I said to Joey the other day. You guys should think of this as your house." She nodded, then looked up at him and smiled on purpose. "We love it here." Then giggled. "Also we met that cat that likes to climb in the tree in the front yard. He can totally get down on his own." He laughed. "That shouldn't be surprising to me. Also you met him, did you? Formal introductions and all that?" She grinned. "He's a proper gentleman. Said his hellos and everything. Very chatty. Followed us home, talking the whole time." "Sounds like him, he never shuts up," he agreed. She laughed at him. He shook his head. "The cat comes onto my property and climbs my tree and then has the nerve to yell at me." She nodded solemnly. "Rotten to his core, he is." She grinned, "But so soft." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Unbelievable. He better not be here the next time I come for dinner or I'm gone." He had taken it too far. He knew that the moment he said it. He could feel it, see it, almost enough to make him think he could grab it and stuff it back into his mouth before it settled. There was a flash of something in her eyes, fear or hurt or something. He had gotten too comfortable, falling into the easiness of it all. "I'm sorry, I was just..." "I know," she interrupted, "I know. I'm sorry. I love to be teased, I really do." "You always did," he remembered. She nodded. "And I, not so much with this, but just. I feel like I owe you an apology. Because anytime that I doubt or misunderstand something you say, it's because of me. And I'm really trying. And I know that it must be annoying, but I never want it to be insulting. Like I'm doubting you because of you." She looked down at her feet, her cheeks pink, her voice low and thin, like she was afraid of saying it too loudly. "You have no idea how much I trust you." His heart thudded in his chest and he turned off the water, wiping his hands on the dish towel. He turned so that his side was against the counter. He thought about all the things he'd read, and all the things he'd heard that afternoon. She had no idea how strong she was, how unbelievable it was that she could make dinner, and make his boys feel welcome, and make friends with chatty demons. That she knew herself well enough to say that to him. That she had enough kindness in her still, in spite of everything, to coddle his feelings as she worked through her own. She had no idea, and that was the problem. "I'm sorry too," he said. She looked up at him to protest and he shook his head. No, if I ever. I think sometimes my first thought is to dismiss your concerns, because sometimes, you can tell me," she said, convinced that an insult was coming her way even now. "Incredible," he told her. Her lips widened slightly and then smiled for a second. "I think you sort of have no idea how, if I ever seem disbelieving, it's because I can't believe it. For a very long time I think someone worked really hard to drown out everyone else, because he knew that if anyone else got a word in, they'd make it clear how wrong he was about everything he was saying and doing to you. And it's going to take a while I think for you not to hear his voice right after everyone else's, not to hear him telling you that they're lying when they say something nice to you. And I'm going to do a better job of reminding myself that's what is happening, because you make it really easy to forget that. You're doing so much better than you think you are. She had been looking at the floor but looked up at him. He tried to think about all the things he'd heard Gaudry say. All the things he'd read. There were so many, that were so disgusting and wrong and terrible. So many. They had been replaying all afternoon. But in that moment, just that moment, the only one he could think of was at least when you were younger you could get by on your looks but we both know they aren't what they used to be. It was a shallow and insulting thing to be thinking about standing here in the weight of all the pain he'd caused. But it was impossible not to, when she looked like that, her perfect cheekbones covered in pink, her jade eyes bright and shining, her bow lips, designed for pouting, that looked even better in a smile. Usually with everything else going on, with everyone around, he could forget almost what she looked like, or at least put it to the back of his mind where it belonged. But standing here, so close to her, just the two of them, it caught in his throat instead. What bigger proof did she need that he had lied about everything than that? Ursula Will thankfully broke into his thoughts. She blinked and then turned towards his son. Joey's asleep. Oh, she smiled, thank you. Then shook her head, it's late. Rob, you can leave those, I'm going to get her up to bed. Do you want me to grab her? He wondered, imagining she wouldn't want to wake Joey. She smiled, but shook her head, thank you, but that's okay. Will had gone back into the living room and she went to follow him, but she stopped and turned back to him, thankfully, at least, I still feel strong enough to carry her. Chapter 10. Summary. Asterisk 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 please heed asterisk asterisk asterisk. I put another 2 trigger warnings down below, please scroll down and read if you're at all concerned. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. It took him less than 10 seconds to size up Janos SLYNT. He hadn't had much interaction with him up until now, except in a few petulantly worded emails, but all it took was one look at the way he kept adjusting his ill-fitting designer suit to understand exactly who this man was. Mr. SLYNT, he greeted him, holding out his hand. I'm Rob Stark, and this is my associate Roderick Castle. Rob SLYNT greeted him, the way older, male opposing counsel always did to take him down a peg, even though he was nearing 40. He didn't bother to introduce them to the 2 younger people behind him. He offered a nod to Roderick before informing them both, the accommodations in this city are very poor. He and Roderick stayed silent. SLYNT smoothed his hand over his shiny tie once more. His face looked like a frog. King's Landing, SLYNT went on, hotels there would knock the socks right off you lot. Spend a lot of time in hotels in your home city, do you? Roderick asked. Turning to him, odd that. He had long taught himself to school his expression, but even still he felt a small smile form. As though SLYNT hadn't heard him, he went on, and the restaurants. Finest restaurants in the world. Passage, have you eaten there? I go about once a week. Haven't heard of it, he lied. Haven't heard of it, SLYNT chortled, turning back to his associates and laughing. Neither of them cracked a smile. It's the finest restaurant in the country. Make a reservation, give them my name, they'll treat you right, eh, boy? That was a mistake. Never had much desire to go to King's Landing, he told him, the smell, the people, the rats. SLYNT's face turned an angry purple, bypassing red altogether. Depending on the person, he would or wouldn't try to piss them off beforehand. Some people, like him, did better when they were angry, more focus, more precision, and he didn't want to give them the advantage. SLYNT, on the other hand, seemed like the type to get disoriented, lost in the petty bullshit. Right now he had both on his side, with limited effort. It had taken nearly nothing to upset SLYNT. And he hadn't needed a nudge at all. He'd arrived angry. Before SLYNT could retort, the judge had approached, walking in between them and opening the door to his chambers. He gestured for SLYNT and his team to go, and SLYNT gave him one more look, straightening that tie again before walking in with his nose turned up towards the ceiling. He looked briefly at Castle, who shook his head, and then they followed in. Roderick Judge Lewin greeted them. "Long time since I saw you two in my chambers together. Thought I'd take him out of retirement, Judge," he joked. Castle guffawed and Lewin smirked, his eyes twinkling. They had known each other a long time. He had clerked for him in law school. When Lewin had been assigned to the case, he'd felt his first glimmer of hope. Lewin turned to Slynt, who introduced himself with a good bit of grandeur, before offering his associates' names. They were all instructed to sit. "I've reviewed the preliminary details," Lewin informed them, and he shook his head. "I do not like cases like this." That tone of voice always made him feel a bit like a naughty schoolboy, wondering if he'd somehow messed something up. "We are not here to discuss the case at large, nor are we here to demonize or insult. We are here for one reason and one reason only, Joanna Faring." Lewin looked at each of them individually, as though each glance was a binding contract. "This is to decide the temporary custody arrangement for this little girl. And that is all. So." With that, Lewin gestured to him. "Your Honor," he began, "I have spent time with Joey. She is an unnervingly sweet, beautiful, intelligent child who is terrified of the world around her. Her gut reaction to men, in particular, is one of fear. The only person, and I say person because her way with animals is something I've never seen, that she is wholly comfortable with is her mother, Ursula." "Because you've never seen her with her father," Slynt interrupted. Counselor Lewin reprimanded. "You'll have your turn." "That's all right, Your Honor, and while I understand we are not here to discuss the case at large, I'd like to answer that." He turned to Slynt, whose nostrils were flaring, his bald head glistening under the overhead lights. "No, I have not seen her with her father. What I have seen is her telling my sister that her father hit her mother. I have seen her surprised that my child could playfully insult me without fear. I have seen her have to remind herself that the most honorable man I've ever known is a safe person to be alone with, even though she plainly adores him. I haven't seen her with her father, and I hope I never do, because he is the reason she walks through life quiet and afraid." He then turned back to Lewin and continued, "On the other hand, her mother makes her happy, and silly, and comfortable. With her mother she does not second-guess herself, she is in a school that has the appropriate amount of rigor and the appropriate amount of fun. She receives love, and affection, and every bit of care one would hope. She gets to be a kid, as she should be. It's in her best interest, both to her person and to her development, to remain in the sole care of her mother ultimately, yes, but certainly for the time being." Lewin nodded, looking down at the papers on his desk. "You've spent time with her?" he asked. He nodded. "Yes, quite a bit recently." Lewin appraised him for a moment and then turned to Slynt, "Counselor." Slynt cleared his throat. Even that sounded like a sneer. He had no idea that was possible. "My client is an upstanding leader in society. He received the finest education, started his own business when he was only 23 and built it into a player on the international stage where it has time and time again set the gold standard." Slynt began. He glanced at Lewin, who had his face schooled, though he imagined he was as unimpressed as he was. Though, Lewin was probably not close to shouting, "What about his fucking daughter?" in his face. Slynt paused for effect, which gave Lewin the opportunity to calmly say, "That's all very impressive, but your client's business record is not of import here." Slynt bristled. "It is of import to establishing his character, which has been unduly and egregiously misrepresented." "Are you going to sue a 6-year-old girl for slander, then?" Castle interrupted. "So much for bringing him on for objectivity." "Counselors," Lewin cut in, "I will have decorum in these chambers. Mr. Slynt, you may proceed, but I urge you to keep your focus on Miss Faring." Slynt gave him and Castle what he likely imagined to be a withering look and then continued, "My client has always wanted what was best for his child. He put her in the best school to ensure her success, and provided her with everything a child could ever need or want. Her mother, on the other hand, stole her away from her school, her home, and her father." Tick, tick, tick. It was exactly the argument he'd warned Ursula they would use. Exactly the argument she'd armed him against. Nevertheless, Slynt went on. "Nevertheless." Lewin seemed surprised too. Slynt's gaze fell on him and he looked back, keeping his face as blank as he could. To better enjoy the moment he repeated, "Nevertheless, my client, out of a fear of the psychological damage that could be done by further displacing the child more than her mother has already seen fit to do, has decided not to contest the mother's plea for temporary sole custody." Everyone was silent for a moment, so much so that he could hear his heart beating. His mind was going between relief and excitement, but also deep suspicion. "Well," then Lewin finally said, "this has now become a different conversation." An hour later, he and Castle were back at his office waiting for Myrcella. They had gone through some of the specifics of the case, though admittedly a good portion of it had been spent shitting on Janos Slynt, things that he didn't want to make Myrcella go through rehashing. Thankfully, after looking at some of it, Castle agreed that their position was a good one. Though he still said he'd been too soft with her. That was the purpose of this meeting, to remedy that. Which was why, in spite of the good news they had to tell her, his stomach was in knots. Lewis knocked on the door and nodded to him and then gestured behind him. "For fuck's sake," he said, "send her in." A moment later, Myrcella entered, her cheeks pink and her eyes bright, dressed more formally than she usually was for their meetings. She had on a grey dress and black tights underneath her pale blue coat. He wondered if she'd dressed up for Castle. The interview. He'd totally forgotten. He'd meant to text her good luck that morning, but he'd been so focused on the meeting with Slynt and Lewin that he hadn't remembered. "Hey," he stood up. Roderick stood up too. "Myrcella Baratheon, this is Roderick Castle." "Mr. Castle." She stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "Thank you so much for coming on board. Robb speaks very highly of you. And you. Please call me Roderick." He shook her hand, looking down at it before releasing her. He gestured for them to go over to his seating area. She could at least be comfortable, as they purposefully made her uncomfortable. "How did it go?" she turned and asked him. He grinned. "You've been granted temporary sole custody." "What?" Myrcella's eyes widened, her complexion paled instantly. "You've been granted temporary sole custody," he repeated. "Joey will remain with you throughout the legal process, however long it takes. There are some. I didn't think it'd be decided today," she told him, her lower lip wobbling. "I didn't." She swiped away a tear the moment it fell from her eye, a smile coming to her face. "Oh my god." With that, more tears and a laugh bubbled out of her. She turned to Castle. "I'm so sorry, I'm not crazy." She turned back to him, looking him in the eye. "She's staying with me." "She's staying with you," he promised. They could get into some of the other points later. The fact that there would be a family services worker appointed to the case. Explaining that for some reason, Gardry hadn't fought her on it. All of that could come later, none of it mattered today. She stepped forward and then her eyes caught on Castle and she stopped herself and held out her hand to him. He took hold of it and she squeezed it gently and then fiercely. He squeezed hers back gently, feeling her fingers shake in his grasp. "Did you know it would be decided today?" she asked. He shook his head. "I hoped, but I wasn't sure." She nodded, "Thank you," and then looked at Castle. "Both. Very much. You. I feel like I can breathe again for the moment. I know we have a long way to go, but I don't think. I don't know that. Well, this just makes all the difference, really. To both me and Joey, so thank you very much." He waited for Castle to mention that Slynt hadn't put up a fight, but he only nodded at her. They all sat down and he stalled getting to the hard part. "How did the interview go?" he asked. Myrcella tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, glancing briefly at Castle and then smiled. "They offered me the job." A grin overtook his face once again. "So good day for you then." She laughed and nodded. "Yeah, not bad." He could ask her more of the details later, and he knew that Castle only had so much patience. "So, you know why I brought Castle on," he said, gesturing between them. "Our relationship, friendship. The way our families are." "He needs a babysitter," Roderick mercifully interrupted him, "and you need a bulldog." Myrcella nodded. "I was happy with a wolf, but I'll take all the help I can get." Roderick nodded. "Myrcella, you are going to be very sympathetic to the judge. You're warm and charming, and that goes a long way even when there isn't a jury involved, as is the case here. We also have the facts on our side." Myrcella nodded and then looked at him. "What was that thing your dad used to say?" He smirked and said to Roderick, "You can get to the butt. But it sounds like your husband is a real asshole, and that lawyer of his." "Apologies for interrupting, but who did he put on lead?" she asked. "Janos Slynt, he told her. "Slynt, she asked, nodding, a small smile on her face. "Okay. So you don't need us telling you what a sniveling asshat he is," Roderick guessed. She laughed lightly. "No, I'm fully abreast of that situation." "The point is," Roderick said, "you have an abundance of evidence against him. We will not need to sensationalize anything. If you ask me, going after sole custody isn't enough, but that's not what we are here to discuss. We are going to keep our attack focused. Think of it like a single great sword going right at them." Myrcella glanced briefly at him and he rolled his eyes before she turned back to Roderick and nodded. "Their defense is going to be more like flinging bits of sand in our eyes." Myrcella nodded. "They are going to use the tiniest things as weapons, since they don't have anything else to work with." "Exactly, Roderick, they are going to weaponize the innocuous. So, what we need to get to the bottom of is what do they have to throw at you that's real." "I understand," she told him. She took a deep breath. "Okay. I've been thinking about this, and I know that there are moments that I wish I had done things differently." "We all do," he told her. "Trust me, we all have kids here. None of us want to be judged by the worst things we've done as parents." "No," she agreed, "but I will be." She shook her head. "The thing is that he spent very little time with us, even less with Joey. Rob, you and I have already discussed his feelings about her schooling. So, I imagine they'll attack me for purposefully trying to stunt her progress or something like that." He nodded and she went on, "Truly the worst thing I've ever done as Joey's mom is not removing her from his home sooner." She looked at Roderick and said, "I know that's not what you need to hear, though. I imagine Rob has gotten you up to speed on some of the incidents between me and my husband." "He has," Roderick said, "but give whatever detail you think will be helpful." "After the one that resulted in the loss of our second child," she said, and then tilted her head, her eyes looking down at her lap. "Well, actually, just before, I started to experience panic attacks. I was not in a place to seek real mental help, but their frequency was getting somewhat debilitating. There were a lot of events that I just needed them to stop." I explained what was happening physically to my GP and he prescribed a pretty strong antidepressant. Addiction runs in my family and so I was wary of taking something every day, so I only took it as needed, but though it did help with the panic attacks, it had strange side effects. Things like sleepwalking, that sort of thing." She stopped and looked up at Roderick. "I want to be clear that nothing ever happened with Joey. But one night I had a really bad panic attack after she went to bed. I took one and it didn't seem to be working. Gardry was there and I couldn't calm down and I shouldn't have taken a second one, but I did. It worked, knocked me out practically. I must have gone to sleep, but I wound up in the garage in my car. Gardry is the one who stopped me. He woke me up. He saved my life." She looked at him. "He did. After he terrorized you into endangering it," he argued, "I'll hold off on the medal." She closed her eyes and smiled a small humorless smile. She looked at Roderick. "See how he howls. Anyway. After that I stopped using them altogether and found other methods to control the panic attacks for the most part. But I can imagine that regardless of that incident, he'd use just the fact that I was prescribed something that strong." Roderick nodded. "He will, and we'll use the same argument we always use, which is half the country is on this stuff and the other half probably should be." Myrcella laughed, but there was a hesitation there, "So that's one thing taken care of." Myrcella nodded and then shrunk into herself once again. Since Roderick was here as her lawyer, he felt no hesitation at being here as her friend. He got out of his chair and went and joined her on the couch, placing his hand on her back in between her shoulder blades. "I don't know if Gardry knows this," she told him. He nodded, rubbing her back. She looked up at him, her jade eyes dry but petrified. "Can you please not tell Sansa and John this?" He shook his head. "I don't tell them anything, but yeah, I promise." She nodded and took a breath that was meant to be steadying but sounded more like a whimper. "For a little while when we were first married, things were good," she told him and then amended, "better. But Gardry had a really big, public deal fall through and they got sort of bad again. This change happened right around when I found out I was pregnant with Joey. It didn't take a genius to know where she was going with this. After what he'd done to you already, he cut in. He remembered how she couldn't quite say the word when she was speaking about losing her child, and he wasn't sure if she felt the same way here, so he said, "It's perfectly understandable that you would have considered not having a child with him." She shook her head. "You don't have to say that. I know that he told her, and I'm saying it because I mean it." "Myrcella, if this is the worst thing you've ever done, then we are golden, aren't we?" They both looked at Roderick, who looked at him for a moment before he nodded. "We can pretty easily make up a defense, but I think we should go with yours. So why don't you tell us why you considered it and why you changed your mind?" She kept her eyes on Roderick but leaned into him and explained, "I considered it for the obvious reasons. I knew that having a child with him would make leaving more difficult. I was afraid of what kind of father he would be. The thought of him hurting my baby. I know that I could have left pregnant, or I had resources, means. But it didn't feel possible. He was really good at making me feel trapped in an unlocked room. He could have wrapped his arms around her then. To hear her blaming him. It felt like progress." Roderick nodded. "But you didn't go through with it, why?" She shrugged. "You have children. Think about the moment that you first felt like a parent. Do you have it in your mind?" Roderick nodded. "Imagine that moment happening in the waiting room at the clinic." She shook her head. "I've never run so fast." She sighed. "Let me be clear, I fully support any woman's right to choose. I just made yours," he suggested. She looked at him and nodded. Someday, he'd tell her that she couldn't say she supported every woman's right to choose if she didn't support her own deliberation, if she didn't stop punishing herself for it. Someday, he'd ask her to give herself the same empathy she offered so freely to others. But for now, he'd offer someone else's, who would give it without hesitation. "I won't tell Sangza," he promised, "but you should." She smiled softly, looking at him for another moment before turning back to Roderick. "In terms of what he could throw at me, I supposed I would say how many grains of sand are on a beach, but I've thought a lot about it and I really think those are the two. And I promise I wouldn't hide anything from you. Joey is far too important for me to try to get away with anything." Roderick nodded. "I believe you." He then gave him a look, "And while I wouldn't have said it like that, I do think our position is strong. Stark and I will talk about a game plan and we can set something up for next week." Myrcella nodded and then looked in between them. "I do have a thought actually. If that's okay." "By all means," Roderick agreed, "you know him better than either of us." "Well, actually it's about Slynt, Myrcella said. I've known him peripherally for a long time. He actually used to work for my grandfather and that's how he met Gadri." Roderick looked at him and he straightened up. She looked in between them and then went on, "He's a sniveling bottom feeder with a lot of pride and no backbone. I am a little surprised that he took this on, to be honest, because though he works for Gadri, he still fears my grandfather. He has absolutely no scruples but a pretty strong instinct for self-preservation. I don't know, I'd need some time to think, but I do wonder if that will affect how hard he comes at me." Roderick and he both shifted in their seats, Roderick giving him a pointed look. "I think you're right," he told her. She looked over at him and he explained, "Knowing Lewin, and the evidence in front of him, I'm pretty sure you would have been granted it anyway, but Slynt didn't fight against the temporary sole custody. He made a dig about you uprooting Joey, as we thought he would, but we weren't sure what they were playing at. We thought maybe it was to save their chits, since they have fewer of them, for the main trial, but it's possible he was representing his own interests more than his clients." "It could be either, honestly," she said. "Do you think it's worth me calling my grandfather?" "Not yet," he said. "You wanted to keep them out of this, didn't you?" She nodded. "But it's something to keep in mind. Even if we don't actually involve him in any way. Slynt doesn't take much to go at. I just want to make sure," Myrcella said to both of them. "I'd never want anything that would jeopardize." "Fear not, Myrcella," Roderick said, standing up. "There are plenty of legal ways to be an absolute asshole." She laughed and stood up as well, shaking his hand. "Thank you again." He nodded to her and then to him and then left. "You did well," he told her when they were alone. She rolled her eyes. "I only cried once, a new record for me in here." And they were happy tears, he reminded her. She smirked, and they headed back to his desk where she'd left her coat and bag. He picked up his phone and didn't see too many emails, but did see that it was 12:35. "Hey, have you eaten lunch?" he asked. She turned to him and smiled. "No, and I'm starved. It's so cold out, I sort of want something warm and spicy." He smirked. "It's 45 degrees. She looked at him blankly. "Exactly." He chuckled and shook his head, going to grab his suit jacket off his chair. His phone started buzzing and he saw that it was JJ's school. Sorry, I have to take this," he said, "the school's calling me." Marcella pulled her own buzzing phone out of her bag. "That's weird, they're calling me too." Notes. TW. Discussion of prescribed drug use. Discussion of contemplated abortion. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Hi all. I know this chapter dealt with a hot button issue. I'd really plead with you not to get into a political discussion in the comments. I understand some of you may have mixed feelings on it, and if you need to discuss, please message me on Tumblr, same handle. From an author's point of view, this felt like a very logical thing that a woman in Marcella's position may have considered, and it felt like the sort of thing that would be likely to come up in this sort of hearing. I really tried to keep my discussion of it focused on the character and the story, and I hope it can be taken as such. On another note, I've noticed a drop in comments, so this is my, hopefully just once a story, plea that if you're reading and enjoying this story, please tell me so. It doesn't need to be long and involved, and I know that sometimes seeing long / multiple comments from other readers can be intimidating, but it really would mean so much to me to know whether more of you are still here and enjoying. Anyway, I'm really excited for the next chapter, and I hope you are too. Xoxo. Chapter 11. Summary. Oh my gosh guys, I really can't thank you enough for the comments on the last chapter. You have no idea what a difference it makes. This chapter got *so long and is basically just different conversations, and I love it. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. At first he'd been relieved that it wasn't another lice situation. Not that the school typically called during the day to say, "Hey Mr. Stark, everything is great and we just want to thank you for entrusting us with your child, JJ." What a gem, but still. The lice thing had been a real pain in the ass. Once he'd realized that the other horrific things they could have been calling about hadn't happened, he'd actually listened to what they were saying. Even still he wasn't wholly prepared for the sight of his 8-year-old with a torn shirt and a bloody nose, looking sullen and terribly unapologetic as he sat there swinging his legs outside the principal's office. "JJ," he said when he got to him. Parental concern outweighed anger every time, and he knelt in front of him, tilting his chin up as gently as he could to look at his nose. "Are you all right?" He nodded. "I'm fine." "What happened?" he asked. The school secretary had been vague on the phone, only telling him that his son had been in a fight, and he had to come get him. He had never gotten a call like that before, and he'd been so busy trying to get details that he hadn't noticed that Marcella had left already. His stomach knotted, looking around for Joey, but there was no one else waiting except the secretary that had called him. JJ opened his mouth to answer, but the door to the principal's office opened and there was Marcella, looking furious, holding Joey in her arms. "Is she okay?" He stood up. Marcella went to answer, but Joey let out a sob that tore his heart out and she turned in towards her daughter, stroking her hair. "We'll see you later, okay?" Marcella asked. He nodded and she peered around him. "JJ, sweetheart, are you all right?" Then to his surprise turned to the principal. "Has the nurse seen him?" "Shouldn't he have ice?" "The nurse has seen him," Principal Neri told her. Marcella started to say something else, but Joey started crying harder. "It's all right," he told her, his hand on the back of JJ's head. "He's okay. Take her home." She nodded and with one last look at JJ she left them to it. He looked down at JJ to see if he was swelling, but he really did seem fine, and certainly didn't seem to be in any real pain. Will was stoic about that sort of thing, JJ not so much. "Mr. Stark," the principal said. "JJ." His hand moved down to JJ's shoulder, squeezing it gently and nudging him to get up. JJ did, leaving his backpack where it was, walking with a bit of a swagger he'd never seen from him before. Actually, he looked a little like Will. They shared certain features, but their demeanors were so different he often forgot them. Now though, JJ appeared like Will did on the football field, when he'd just made a good play and was trying not to gloat. This was his first time being called into the principal's office as a father. As a kid it had only happened once or twice, and he'd feared his parents' anger for whatever he'd done far more than the principal's. He and JJ took their seats across from him. Perhaps it was his time as a lawyer, but he'd grown cynical of long pauses. It was rare that a person truly didn't know what to say, and when that was the case, they were rarely so unmoving. A person truly speechless had their mind going a mile a minute. Principal Nuri seemed like his mind moved a bit slower than that. "Mr. Stark, we've had an incident today," he said needlessly. "JJ attack." "That's not true." JJ immediately cut in. "JJ," he warned. He looked at the principal. "I'm sorry, go on." He didn't want the drama, he wanted the story. Joey had been inconsolable, and Marcella had been furious. He knew that JJ hadn't really taken to Joey, but in spite of his wildness, he was gentle and kind. Yes, he might knock over a vase running through the house, but he would never attack a little girl. "There was an incident in the cafeteria today," the principal went on. "JJ started a fight with Ruger Bolton." "Ruger Bolton, isn't he in the 4th grade?" he asked. He knew his father, Ramsey. They'd been in high school together, a junior when he was a senior. He'd been after Sansa for a while until he, John and Theon had put an end to that. Roose, too, he knew. He was a lawyer as well, and a very good one. Soulless, though. His father had warned him against taking an internship with his practice when he was younger. John had warned him against bringing him onto Marcella's case, not that he'd even considered it. There were so many families like that here, their generations falling at the same time. Unfortunately the Boltons were one of them. "He is," the principal said, but nevertheless it was JJ who attacked first. "There are witnesses, Mr. Stark." He nodded and looked at JJ. "Is this true?" "I pushed him first," JJ allowed. "Why?" he asked. "He was picking on Joey." JJ exploded. "He wouldn't leave her alone. I thought I'd seen him bugging her the other day, but she lied about it. But then I saw it today. He pulled her hair and wouldn't let her get by him. He was being really mean to her." Anger had always made him more precise, until now. He felt immobile. An image of Ruger came to mind. Not necessarily big for his age, but solid. Joey, a little wisp of a thing, 3 if not 4 years his junior. How was he meant to think straight when his blood was boiling? "Mr. Stark, regardless." "Regardless," he interrupted, like he'd just admonished JJ for doing. Nuri looked at him. "Regardless, we do not condone bullying." "As you shouldn't," he agreed, "so I trust Ruger has been duly punished." The principal shifted awkwardly in his seat and so he turned to JJ. "Why don't you go wait outside for a few minutes?" JJ looked between him and the principal. "It's okay, go on. We'll talk more about this later." JJ got up and left, closing the door behind him. The principal had adopted a look of dismissiveness. He could understand why. Very quickly he was getting into the not my baby class of parent, unwilling to take responsibility for their children's actions. He was sure he saw it all the time, every time he had one of these meetings most likely. "Let me be clear, Principal Nuri," he began. "I am not suggesting that what JJ did was okay, though he wasn't able to say it was wrong either. All I'm suggesting is that context matters. It isn't as though JJ just walked up to Ruger and attacked him, as you suggested. Ruger was bullying a little girl." Nuri sighed. "The trouble is, Mr. Stark, nobody saw that." His stomach churned in anger. "That is a problem. Is it common for the 1st graders to be left unsupervised?" Nuri bristled. It was a crowded cafeteria. Of course, the children are not left unsupervised. Yet somehow, a 6-year-old girl who would ask permission before fleeing a burning building was on her own long enough for a 4th grade boy to bully her, he mused. "Allegedly," Nuri suggested. He started and broke off. How many grown men were going to have the nerve to call Joey a liar to him today? "I'm assuming Joey and JJ's stories were the same." Nuri sighed. "Yes, they were, but clearly your families are close. You have to understand the fuss that could be made. People, not me, of course, could suggest that Joey was lying to protect JJ. Ramsay Bolton, you mean he supplied? Nuri sighed once again. Mr. Stark, understand my position. No one witnessed Ruger bothering Joey, 3 different people saw JJ shove him. His brow furrowed. 3. In a crowded cafeteria, only 3 people saw him. How many kids did you speak to? I spoke to the teachers, Nuri told him. He ran his hand down his face, and tried to calm himself. All right, he said, so what's the situation? JJ will need to go home for the remainder of the day, Nuri told him, and will have a 1-day suspension on Monday. He nodded, biting his tongue. Mr. Stark, my hands may be tied in regards to punishing him, but typically the suspension for fighting would be 3 days. He tasted blood in his mouth but said, I appreciate that, thank you. And what about Ruger? He's been sent home for the day, Nuri said with a helpless shrug. For the record, the suspension isn't my problem, he told him. Kids don't get to hit each other, I get that, and I'll make sure that JJ knows that. I have made sure that JJ knows that, and the fact that I've never been called in here before should be proof of that. He would never do anything like this unprovoked. He shook his head. That doesn't matter though, not really. You heard what he just said. This has been happening to Joey and she covered it up. Do not, he warned. Do you have any idea what that little girl has been through? Do you have any idea what her and her mother are going through? Say whatever you need to the PTA, but do not in here with me say allegedly. You're an educator, Mr. Nuri, and you have given them all an education today. You've taught a little girl that her word is not to be believed. You've taught a boy that he can get away with anything so long as someone doesn't see him do it. You've tried to teach my son that defending against violence isn't worthwhile. He smirked, and stood up, but between you and me I don't see that one sticking. You may not be in a classroom, but everything you do here is teaching them a lesson. Think about that, the next time you're concerned about the position you're in. He waited for the principal to say something, but he didn't, so he opened the door. He didn't want JJ to think he was entirely off the hook, so he put a happier voice on. Thanks for your time, Mr. Nuri. Have a great weekend, he said. JJ looked at him as he approached and crooked his hand. Come on, let's go. JJ picked up his backpack and he took it from him and slung it over his shoulder. He offered JJ his hand, and his son slipped his in, less bravado than he'd had minutes earlier. He nodded to the school secretary and then walked JJ outside. It had started to bluster a little bit, but JJ held his coat limply, as impervious to it as he'd been at his age. Did you eat lunch? He asked him. Yeah, JJ nodded. You hungry? He asked. JJ cracked a smile and looked up at him, his freckled nose scrunching. Yeah. Me too. Burgers? He asked. JJ nodded, so he brought him over to his car. Even though Will wasn't here, JJ ran to the front seat as though someone might try to take it from him. Ever since JJ had passed the height and weight requirements to sit there, he chose the strangest moments to challenge Will for it. Sometimes Will just rolled his eyes and allowed it, having the occasional apathy that came with all the privilege of being the firstborn. Others he used his hips and butt and everything else at his disposal to keep JJ from the throne. He needed a few minutes to calm down from his meeting with Nuri, so he kept quiet in the car. JJ uncharacteristically followed his lead, which was wise. There was a spot right out front, their favorite burger place, but it was surprisingly crowded given that it was a Friday afternoon. The hostess smiled at them and brought them to a vinyl-covered booth. He and JJ both picked up their menus even though they always got the same thing. Can we get fries and onion rings and share? JJ asked. He agreed without looking at him, hiding his smirk behind his menu. It wasn't like he wanted JJ to be afraid obviously, or anything, but he couldn't help but let him stew in it a little. Their server came over and they each ordered bacon, cheddar, caramelized onion medium rare for him. Cheddar, hot peppers and special sauce medium for JJ. It was a testament to the solemnity of the occasion that JJ didn't ask him if he could get a soda. He took a sip of the water that had been brought and looked at JJ. Tell me what happened, he said. The other day I was leaving gym class and I saw Joey on the playground. Her class has recess at the same time as some of the 4th graders, I guess. He nodded, though that seemed like an odd choice to him. She was sitting on this rock reading, not doing anything to anyone, and Ruger and some of his friends were sort of, I don't know, surrounding her a little, I guess. His stomach knotted, surrounding her. JJ nodded, sipping his water. I couldn't hear them obviously, but I don't know. Ruger and his friends suck. Remember last year when Sam Tali got his head shoved in the toilet? That was them. He'd forgotten that. Sam and Jilly had been really upset. So had Kitty, she loved him. Okay, he shook his head. So you asked Joey about it? She said it was nothing, but she was lying. JJ said the word with such venom, which he was pretty sure was his fault. But it was kind of obvious she was lying, so whatever. And then today at lunch I saw him do it. He wouldn't let her get past him, and he was in her face, and then he pulled her hair. So I went over to tell him to stop, but he wouldn't listen, and he went to go trip her, so I pushed him out of the way. And I don't know, I guess I pushed him hard or whatever because he fell down. And he was saying all these mean things about her, and I wanted him to shut up, so I punched him, and then he punched me, and then the teachers broke it up. He was having a really hard time trying to think about what he would have done differently. But that wasn't the point. Because if you were supposed to want better for your kids, then you were supposed to teach them to be better, too. Why didn't you tell me when you'd seen it the first time? He asked. Because she begged me not to. JJ practically yelled. Okay, it's okay, calm down, he urged. He took a breath and said, JJ, it's really important that we respect people's secrets. Okay. But maybe let's make a rule that it's okay to tell if we're worried about someone else's safety, okay? He nodded. I'm sorry. JJ, did they tell you you're suspended on Monday? He asked. JJ nodded. Okay. Look. You can't go around hitting people. JJ nodded again. There are other things you could have done to help. You could have taken Joey away. You could have called for a teacher. We can't have you thinking that fighting is the only way to deal with people like that. I have to deal with people like that all the time, and I've had to learn different ways of doing it. We're going to help you find some too, okay? Yeah, but JJ stopped himself and looked at him. He nodded. He's a bully, Dad. If I'd gotten a teacher, he just would have called me a tattletale. If I'd taken Joey away, he would have followed or waited until she was alone or something. That's what he does. Now he knows. Their server came with their burgers, fries and onion rings. He passed JJ the ketchup and watched as he put a disgusting amount on his burger and then more on his plate for his fries. JJ passed it to him and put a bit on his plate and burger, and then grabbed a fry out of the basket. What does he know? He asked. JJ had a mouthful of burger. He went to answer and Rob shook his head, so JJ finished chewing and after dramatically swallowing his bite did so again. He knows, JJ mused, that he doesn't get to do it to her. He couldn't help but smile at that. I didn't think you liked Joey, he suggested. JJ scrunched his nose, and shrugged. I don't not like her, I don't know. It's Joey. But sometimes it's like she just wants to hang out with Will, not me and Kitty. He nodded. I think that's just because she and Will like the same things. I like to read, JJ protested. He fixed him with a look and JJ grinned, dunking a fry in ketchup. I can read. He chuckled and JJ shrugged. She's more fun with Marcella. Who is so fun? She seemed mad though. Is she mad at me? He shook his head. No, of course not. You're probably the person she's least mad at in the whole world right now. JJ smiled at that, a startling look of relief on his face. He knew JJ was taken with her, but he didn't know how taken. Top 5, JJ mused. He asked as he took a bite of his burger. I'm in the top 5 of people Marcella is not mad at, JJ explained. There's Joey, obviously, and Will. She likes him a lot. And you. She really likes you. And Auntie Sansa, he supplied, Uncle John. Kitty. JJ scrunched his nose. I was gonna say Grey Wind, but okay. He chuckled. After this we're calling Uncle John to tell him Marcella likes Grey Wind more than him. JJ giggled. Deal. Then asked, Dad. Am I in trouble? He really wished he had someone to talk to. If he called John, he'd buy him a present. In all honesty, he kind of wanted to too, but he knew that he couldn't. Yeah, he told him, his stomach knotting. You're in trouble, but I'm not mad at you, if that helps. Kinda depends on how much trouble I'm in, JJ said. He laughed in surprise, I'm still deciding. JJ nodded glumly, so he warned, pouting won't help. I'm not pouting, JJ said stubbornly, a small smile appearing on his face. He rolled his eyes, eat your burger. We're getting milkshakes after. When they were finished with lunch, he called the boy's nanny to let her know she could have the afternoon off. She was very grateful considering she'd been choosing between finishing a paper and going to a keg party, and especially so when he promised he would pay her for the whole week. He asked her about Monday, but she had classes all through the morning. That wasn't such a big deal, he didn't like to do it, but he could work from home that morning. After that he called Lewis, and asked him to forward any important calls to his cell. Thankfully he rarely booked meetings for Friday afternoons, so they had an unexpected one together. Will was at his best friend's house for the afternoon. His parents were dropping him off before they went out for dinner, so they went and got Greywind and then took him to some trails they liked to walk. He got caught up on all the third-grade gossip. Apparently a boy was after Kitty, but she was very into pretending to be a witch at the moment and only needed boys so that she could put their toes in her cauldron. JJ's best friend had changed once again, to a boy named Ian, and he had made Kitty promise that Ian's toes were, like JJ's, on the no-no list. As an adult, his toes had lost their power, so he was safe, for now. Because he had the luxury of extra hours, when they got back to the house he started making his mom's pasta sauce, the one that he and all of his siblings still craved. Even Rukan tried to make it now, though he often sent disaster photos to their group chat of it going wrong, very aggressively atting Sangza for not giving more specific instructions. JJ hung out in the kitchen with him while he got it ready, and then they sat down at the kitchen table so that he could continue to teach him Gin Rummy. That was where Will found them when he came in from hanging out with Teddy. The term playdate had been outlawed for him last year. Hey guys, he greeted them, his shoes and jacket already off. He sat down next to JJ and looked at his hand, immediately moving one card to a different place in his hand. Pick up the pile. But he only has 2 cards. JJ protested. Yeah, but you're going to have none, Will said. He pointed 5 cards back, from here. JJ sighed but followed his brother's instruction and picked up the cards. He watched Will help him rearrange them, the way JJ slowly started to smile, his mouth dropping open. He was pretty sure he heard him say oh he's going down, but it was drowned out by Will telling him to put a 2 somewhere else. His sons grinned at him as JJ laid down his little groupings in 3s and 4s. Triumphantly he turned over his last card and smacked it down on the table. Nicely done, he laughed. 3 aces. You killed me. JJ shrugged. Will helped. Will smirked indulgently and started cleaning up the cards. He handed him his 2 left, and Will started to shuffle. Try to widen your grip a bit, he suggested. He watched as Will adjusted. Yep, then you'll have more. Well done. Can we play again? JJ asked. You 2 play, he urged, because sometimes it was more fun to watch them play than partake himself. I'm going to make some salad. He squeezed Will's shoulder as he walked by. Good day. Yeah, you're home early, Will noted. I got suspended, JJ said. What? Why? Will asked. I got into a fight, JJ told him, with that Bolton kid. He looked over from where he was standing at the fridge to see Will take JJ's chin in his hand, tilting his face up. Did he get you in the nose? Will asked. Only after I got him, JJ muttered. JJ, he warned, and then immediately looked in the fridge so they wouldn't see him trying not to laugh. That was the thing no one told you about being a parent. Sometimes, even when your kids were objectively being bad, it was hilarious. The shit they said. Sangza often had to leave the room when he or John were trying to discipline because she entirely undercut their message. It was one of the ways he knew something was wrong with Roslyn. She never found any humor in any of it. He pulled out the vegetables and washed them and then brought them and the cutting board and knife over to the table so he could sit with them. So wait, Will said, as he arranged his cards. JJ turned his towards him and he helped him put them in the right order and then started chopping a pepper. Why'd you get in a fight with Roger? Ruger, JJ corrected. What a dumb name for a dumb kid, Will offered loyally. Will, he warned, but couldn't even try that time and laughed into the salad bowl. He was picking on Joey, JJ told him. Will was entirely silent and he looked up to see him putting his cards down. What? Will asked, his tone livid. What do you mean he was picking on her? JJ sighed, he wouldn't let her get by and was calling her names, he pulled her hair and... Are you serious? Will asked, is she okay? I think she's fine, Will, he said. You think? Will stood up. It's Jay, she's 6, he's what? 10. I'm going to kill him. Where's the school directory? Will, calm down, he urged. No, Will said. Then sit down, he ordered. Will looked like he wanted to challenge him, but after a moment he sat down. He wasn't sure he'd ever seen him so angry. He pushed his glass of water towards him and Will stared at it for a moment before he took a sip. Marcella picked her up at school, she's with her, okay, he promised. She didn't seem hurt, she was just upset. Well, obviously. Will exploded, after her, can we go see them? JJ looked at him hopefully, yeah, can we? It was the sort of thing that would have made his dad cry. There was nothing that touched him like shows of loyalty. He wasn't faring much better. I'll text Marcella after dinner, see if Joey is up for it, okay, he asked. Will shook his head, I'm going to kill him. The fact that he'd said much the same about Gadri only the day before was not lost on him. Hey, he offered forcefully though, don't say things like that. I understand you're upset, I'm upset. But we're going to take care of it. Sounds like JJ took care of it, Will mumbled. Will, what exactly do you want me to do, huh, he asked him. Do you want me to call his parents? Believe me, I've thought about it. But this is up to Marcella to deal with how she sees fit. You know I'll back her up with whatever she chooses, but this is her decision. Whatever. Will crossed his arms. He had a feeling he and Will weren't done with this conversation, but he had no interest in continuing it in front of JJ. As far as he knew, JJ had never thought anymore about the whole suitcase or villain thing, thankfully too young to focus on something that abstract. Thankfully too sheltered to imagine such things could happen. Though he should have changed the subject, he didn't, chopping vegetables in annoyance. He wasn't annoyed at them. He was proud of them. He was annoyed at the situation and himself. He felt like Nuri, suggesting that his hands were tied. But he felt like they were. Marcella had accused him of having a white knight complex basically, and though all he wanted to do was burst in and resolve this for both of them, he knew that she'd had far too many choices when it came to raising Joey taken away from her. It wasn't his place to do anything, he knew that, and he hated it. He went back to cutting the vegetables while the boys started to play. He could feel Will's glower on him every so often. Dad, JJ asked. He looked up thinking JJ was going to ask for help with his hand, but instead he asked, have you decided my punishment yet? Punishment for what? Will asked. He transferred some vegetables from the cutting board into the salad bowl. For fighting, he answered. Is that a joke? Will asked, he was defending Joey. Yeah, I hear you, Will, he told him. He wished he could silently communicate with his eyes for him to leave it alone, because the more Will pushed the worse he was going to have to make JJ's punishment. He'd been thinking about it all afternoon, and though he didn't want to, he knew that he did have to punish him. You're grounded for a week, he told JJ. JJ opened his mouth and then closed it and then asked, can I still go to Will's game and Auntie Sansa's for dinner after on Sunday? Of course, he agreed, family doesn't count. He'd make sure to invite them over midweek to soften the fact that his playdates would have to be cancelled. Will looked like he was about to talk himself into joining JJ in being grounded, but Grey Wind's ears perked and then he trotted over to the glass door. A moment later there was a knock on it. He went over to it and opened it to find Marcella and Joey standing there. Joey was already in her pajamas and a big sweater, and had her head leaned against Marcella's hip. Hi honey, he crouched down, how ya doing? I'm okay, she told him. Would it be okay if I talked to JJ for a minute? Of course, come on in, he said. He was about to get up but Joey walked in and wrapped her arms around his neck. His heart constricted and he wrapped his arms around her tiny body, rubbing her back. I'm sorry I got him in trouble, she whispered. Hey, he shook his head. This is exactly what he was afraid of. You didn't. Okay. You didn't do anything wrong. We all just want to make sure you're okay and help you if you're not. I'm okay, she said, but she didn't let go. He stood up, still holding her, and settled her on his hip. His hand stroked into her hair, and he nodded at Myrcella, who was fending off Grey Wind's attentions. Get in here, he urged. She closed the door behind her and he waited until she fell into step with him to walk back towards the boys. How's everybody doing here? Myrcella asked them. Without hesitating, she placed her hands on Will's shoulders and kissed the top of his head. He saw her squeeze them before releasing him, and then she went and bent her knees so she could look at JJ. What am I supposed to say to you? She asked him, cupping his cheeks. How's your nose? It's fine, JJ said. She shook her head, and then wrapped her arms around him. He watched as JJ leaned his cheek against her shoulder, his arms wrapped around them. He sat back in his seat and set Joey in his lap, bringing the salad bowl closer to them. He picked out a piece of carrot and handed it to her. She munched on it thoughtfully, looking at Myrcella and JJ. Will was looking at her though. Hey Joe, he offered, with more reserve than he would have thought him capable of at the moment. Hi Will, she said, leaning her back against his chest, her soft hair brushing his jaw as she rested the shallow weight of it against him. What's that? Will asked, gesturing to the folder Joey had put down. Oh, she picked it up. I made something for JJ. JJ pulled out of Myrcella's arms and asked, for me? Joey nodded and slid off his lap, grabbing the folder and walking over to him. She pulled a piece of paper out and handed it to him. JJ looked down at it and grinned. Is this me? A small smile appeared on Joey's face and she nodded. He turned it around. I'm one of the first men. The picture featured JJ holding a sword out in front of him. Mommy said they wore. Joey looked at Myrcella. Cloaks, JJ supplied. Yeah, they did. Right, Will? That's right. Will leaned over Joey, pointing at the drawing. Is that Kitty as one of the children of the forest? Joey nodded and Will grinned. It's really good, Joe. I like her magic balls. JJ turned it back around and looked. Oh yeah, they're cool. How'd you get the sparkles? I have special paint, Joey told him. Mommy helped. You can borrow them tomorrow if you want. Or I can. I could try to play first men with you. I don't really know how, but JJ smiled. I'll teach you. Then his face fell. But I can't. I'm grounded. He felt Myrcella's eyes on him, but it was Will who spoke first. That's okay, JJ. Joey doesn't count, Will said, turning to him. Does she, Dad? He meant it as a challenge, clearly, but it was a gift, honestly. There was no part of him that wanted to punish JJ for what he did. So though Will was doing it to help JJ, and a little bit to punish him, it gave him an opportunity. No, I told you, he said, family doesn't count. The smile Joey gave him nearly stopped his heart. He smiled back but had to look away, and made the mistake of looking at Myrcella. Want to help me find a place for this in my room? JJ asked Joey, breaking him out of it. Joey looked at Myrcella, who nodded at her, so she followed after JJ, Will falling into step beside her, his hand on her upper back. Grey Wind predictably trotted after them all. What the actual fuck was this day? Myrcella asked the moment they were out of earshot. He shook his head and shrugged. Wine. She nodded. Really, yes. He went over to open a bottle and she sat down at the kitchen island. There was white in a fridge downstairs, but he never really drank it and held up a bottle of red. She gave him a thumbs up, so he uncorked it and grabbed 2 glasses. When he turned back around, he chuckled. She'd placed her forehead down, resting it on her hands on the island. He poured a glass of wine and grabbed one of her wrists, bringing her hand to the glass. She sat back up and shook her head. He poured himself a glass and she held hers up. To those kids of yours, she said. And that one of yours, he agreed. They each took sips and then she looked around and sniffed. Her eyes went wide and she looked at him. Is that? Of course she'd remember his mom's sauce as well as the rest of them. He bet she had the recipe somewhere. He wondered if she made it. For some reason, he almost knew she'd never served it to Gardry, but he hoped maybe when he was traveling she made it for herself and Joey. Yeah, that's it, he confirmed. She smiled and closed her eyes as though to better smell it. Can you guys stay? Her eyes opened. ID. Please, he urged. I can't take any more of Will's righteousness on my own, plus, you two were looking at some visitors anyway. She smiled. We'd love to. Can I do anything to help? I'd like to say no, he said, grabbing a pot to turn the water on to boil, but, would you have more of that salad dressing? I can send Will for it. I'll do you one better, she said, I'm going to make you some of your own. Mine was going to taste really sad after yours, he confessed. She giggled and squeezed his arm as she went past him. You can, oh, you found it. He didn't bother watching her make it, knowing that it would never taste the same if he did. Knowing, too, that when they ran out, she'd make him more. That she'd smile when he asked, as though he was the one doing her a kindness. She went and grabbed the salad bowl off the table and tossed the dressing on. Will was giving you a hard time, huh? She asked. No more than I gave my dad, he told her. Then felt the need to explain, I didn't punish JJ because I thought what he did was wrong. She turned to him and nodded, I know. You punished him because you had to. I'm glad he did what he did, he finally said out loud. Me too, she offered with a shaky breath, I just wish he didn't have to. Is he in trouble at school? Suspended on Monday, he told her, and shrugged, it's fine. She shook her head, and then peered at him, do you want me to watch him? Aren't you starting your new job? He asked, then added, this was not the celebration you should be having for that, by the way. She smiled, it's kind of perfect actually. But no, the gallery is closed next week because they're at an art fair in High Garden, so I don't start until the following week, and I'd like to unless you made other plans. Even if I had, he'd make me break them, he noted. A blush ran up her cheeks and she giggled, it's embarrassing how happy that makes me. This must be what it's like for you with Joey. Not to brag, but she hugged me, he noted, and she grinned, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. How's she doing? She shrugged, it wasn't a great afternoon, she feels really awful about JJ. And on the one hand, I don't want her to be impervious to that, you know. That he got in trouble protecting her. I don't want her to not feel anything about that and just take it for granted. But equally I don't want her to blame herself for other people's actions. How do you teach two lessons at the same time when they contradict each other? He sighed and set his glass down on the island, leaning forward on his elbows. Ursula, I have been asking myself that all afternoon. She smiled, really? He nodded, a smile coming to his face too, completely. That sort of makes me feel better, she told him, and then her eyes widened. Not that you're struggling, but it's isolating. Parenting alone. Do you find that? Yeah, he told her, all the time really. It doesn't seem that way, she said, so I never asked. You're such a good dad, it seems so natural to you. Thank you, he couldn't help but smile, it's not. But I guess I'm glad it seems that way. But it couldn't be further from the truth. And I never know if the questions I have are real or if I'm just freaking out because I don't have someone to turn to and ask in the moment. She nodded and took a sip of wine. You can ask me. If you want. I probably won't know, but I can make you not feel crazy for wondering. I may take you up on that, he told her. She smiled, you should. You may regret it, he warned. She shook her head, I won't. She tried to joke, I certainly owe you anyway. I'm not really into ledgers, he noted. She nodded. Especially with you. She undid all his training. Say less, listen more. Always think of the farthest, darkest point someone could take your words to. For her, though, he'd put them in writing. Sign them in blood. Maybe that would make her believe them. Him. Rob, she swallowed. He thought it might be another warning. That might finally exhaust his patience with this whole day. Instead, though, she asked softly, is it some weakness I gave to her? Is it, in my genes? My mother, me, her? Is there something obvious about us? Did I pass something on to her? Many things, he said. Her eyes flicked to his and he held her gaze, but weakness wasn't one of them. He had the list at the ready, if she asked. It was a draft, an ongoing accounting of a different kind. She smiled sadly, among them, Stark boys who think it's up to them to protect her. That smile turned to one of happiness when they both heard Joey's giggle. A moment later, the kids came into the kitchen, Joey walking in between JJ and Will, Grey Wind trailing behind. "Can you guys stay for dinner?" JJ asked Mercilla. Mercilla grinned, "That's the plan, Stan, and I think it's ready, so let's get hands washed." Will nudged Joey towards the sink and lifted her up by her waist, JJ quickly the faucet. JJ leaned up and turned on the water, making Joey lament, "Oh JJ, your sleeve." "That's alright," Will said as she started to wash her hands, "it'll be covered in pasta sauce in a minute." He smirked, but the kids dissolved into giggles. He turned and saw Mercilla smiling, too. "There are worse things to inherit," he mused, and watched as her eyes softened, but even still he had to ask, "Aren't there?" Notes. I hope you all enjoyed this. P.S. If like me you've been going through IT with Midnights, if you leave a comment would love to know thoughts, lyrics, fave songs, theories, anything. If you're not a T-Swift fan then rip to your internet experience for the past 20 hours or so. Chapter 12. Summary. Hi all. Oh my goodness, it's been a minute with this one. Thank you to everyone who commented on the last chapter. I'll go through and respond to comments in the but really please know that they mean so much to me. I really take each of them to heart. There has been a time jump since the last chapter. I fill in some of the blanks, but it was important to me to sort of have some time pass etc., and there wasn't enough material I wanted to include that time period to justify whole chapters. If anything of importance happened, it'll be referenced in this and future chapters. I hope you enjoy. Chapter text. Look, it's a Sunday and I'm with my family. He closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose in between his thumb and forefinger. It's billable, right? The attorney on the other end of the phone tried to joke. When he didn't so much as exhale in the direction of a laugh, the guy said, "I think it's important we get this ironed out. My client will not budge on this. Your client got caught sleeping with the nanny, and when that came out was slapped by my client's sister who he was also having an affair with, so I'm not sure exactly where you think your client has any room to be making demands," he noted in exasperation. "The ski house is very important to him," the attorney said. "Which is probably why his wife is determined that he shouldn't have it," he thought to himself. "If only his marriage vows had been," he said instead. They spoke for a few more minutes without getting much of anywhere. It seemed that all of the cases he was working on currently were particularly and unnecessarily fraught. Not that it mattered, but he didn't even like any of his clients, finding so many of them petty, fighting over porcelain services no one ever used and third homes they went to once a year. He should be grateful, he knew, that he was dealing with these small matters while things were on a bit of a break with Mercilla's case. But they just felt like a waste of time. Turning off his work phone, he left John's office where he'd stepped in to take the call a half hour earlier. His hand went to Lady's head, who'd followed him in there and waited patiently for his call to be over. She leaned her cheek against his leg and he felt his annoyance start to dissipate. It continued to as he walked through the kitchen, and smelled the chili cooking on the stove. He gave it a stir and followed the voices into the dining room. "Look," Kitty grinned at him, turning her blue construction paper towards him and showing him her drawing. He chuckled, "Uncle Bran's going to love it." Sangsa's hand went automatically to Kitty's back to steady her as she adjusted in her seat, getting off her knees so she could keep working on her card. She was sitting in between her and JJ, helping them both make birthday cards for Bran. JJ pushed his towards Sangsa, pointing at a specific place, and Sangsa took a glittery pen and outlined something for him. "You're gonna say this is from me too, right?" he asked JJ, pressing a kiss to the back of his head. JJ giggled. "Yeah, I'll say you did this bit." He gestured to a portion that could only be called abstract. "Perfect," he chuckled. He glanced at Sangsa, "All good here?" She nodded, so he walked through the dining room into the less formal sitting room. There was a burst of cool air as John brought in more firewood, Ghost and Grey Wind following behind him, walking around Mercilla and Will. They were sitting on the floor together, a pile of vinyls in between them. Will's hair was still wet from his shower and he was taking one of the albums Mercilla was offering to him, while she pointed at something on the back. "Your stepdad has such a good collection," Mercilla told John as he bent down to add another log on. John's stepdad Arthur had recently retired. In celebration, he and John's mom Lionel had decided to sell their house and travel the world for a year or so. That had meant a massive downsizing project, with some things being put into long-term storage, others being sold and given away, and much of it coming to John and Sangza. Myrcella and Sangza had spent an afternoon going through their library, making piles for everyone. He and John had been doing some work on their house with Arthur when they had the time, getting it ready to sell. The kids had all gotten little packets of stickers in their own color to put on the things that they wanted to get. Will had rested his whole pack on the hood of Arthur's incredible vintage convertible. While they were all happy for them, getting a chance to live the life they hadn't gotten to when they were younger, selfishly they were all pretty upset they were going. Though they didn't have to, they had stood in as grandparents for Will and JJ, especially since his dad had died. They'd be back to visit, but it wasn't the same as them calling on a random Saturday morning to see if they could swing by to see him and the kids, bringing donuts or bagels, and doting on all of them. "You're just saying that because you have a crush on him," John teased her. He glanced at Myrcella, who blushed and laughed. "Well, so does Sangza." "That's true," Sangza called from the dining room. "So weird." Will shook his head. He and John chuckled and he looked over to the couch by the window. His feet carried him over there before he'd made the decision to, and he plopped down dramatically. "You were supposed to save me," he lamented. His phone had been going all day for some reason. He had ignored most of the calls and emails, but when this attorney had called for the 4th time he'd decided to take it. Joey had promised to come and tell him JJ had fallen down a well if he wasn't back in 5 minutes. She turned to him, resting her cheek on the back of the couch, and grinned. "I'm sorry. I got distracted." He had no illusions that she had actually forgotten. In spite of how much progress she'd made over the past month or so, she wouldn't interrupt him when he was on a work call for anything. She was a good liar though. It came incredibly naturally to her, scarily so. After the incident with Rutger Bolton, Myrcella had spoken to her therapist about it, who had connected her with a child psychologist. Joey had met with her, but they hadn't really hit it off, so instead, Myrcella had worked with her own therapist to figure out how to ask Joey the right questions. That was how they'd learned why Joey had lied to JJ, and kept from everyone else, that Rutger had been bothering her. She'd been afraid that if she'd said something, Myrcella would pull her out of the school, maybe even take her out of the north. She'd been afraid that maybe it would mean that Myrcella would go back to King's Landing, to her father. She didn't lie the way other kids lied, to get away with something, to get more of something. She covered things up because she was afraid even now sometimes of making a fuss. He'd ask her casually if she was hungry, and she'd tell him no, only for her stomach to growl 5 minutes later. It had driven Myrcella to the point of desperation, terrified that her child might not get the things that she needed. It made her hypervigilant. Everywhere they went she had snacks, water, an extra pair of clothes, a warmer coat. She'd grown even skinnier with worry over the idea of Joey not eating, developed purple circles under her eyes in concern that she wasn't sleeping. They'd turned a corner, though, a couple of weeks ago, and things had been better since. Even still, he couldn't help but watch her carefully too. Looking for the edges of it, trying to see if she had the same tells as Myrcella. Both seemed equally incapable of deception at the moment. Joey was on her knees on the couch cushion, looking out the window. Someone, John probably, had draped one of Sangza's hand-knit blankets over her, so it looked like a veil on top of her head, and she had tucked her hands in and then wrapped it all around herself. He turned around. "What are we looking at?" "It's snowing," she told him. They'd made it to Halloween without snow, but in the Great Northern tradition, every kid had complained that night about having to wear a jacket over their costume, certain houses passing out hot apple cider to keep the trick-or-treaters going. They'd had some since then, but not a real snowstorm. It had held for Will's game earlier. They'd moved it to 10 a.m. because the idea of cancelling it entirely was unheard of, but it was coming down pretty heavy now. JJ and Will were so used to it that other than when it was enough to cause a snow day, they hardly registered it anymore. They liked the snow because they liked snow activities, but they had lost the wonder of it a bit due to how constant it was here. Joey, though, had spent her life in King's Landing and was entirely unused to it. He looked out the window, and saw it falling in thick clumps. "Hey Elle," he turned to her. She looked over at him, a brow raised. "I think you should leave your car here tonight, I'll drive you guys back." She rolled her eyes. "I did learn to drive in the snow, You know. I remember that, John agreed, switching out the record. He turned to him and his brow furrowed, and, something else I remember. Wasn't there an incident involving ice and the brand new sign the school had gotten? Oh my God, Marcella laughed, lying back on the floor and letting Grey Wind flop his head across her neck. Do you think we'll get a snow day? Will asked predictably. Too early. John crushed all his dreams. He turned back and looked at Joey. Her sweet face was awash in the white glow from outside. He could see the reflection of all of it in her eyes. Are they really all different? She asked him. The snowflakes, he clarified. She nodded, yeah. They're like fingerprints. She smiled. What if two are the same? Like soulmates. There had been a lot of talk about soulmates, recently. One of the myths Will had read to her was about them, and like Cyclopses before them, it had caused a bit of a deep dive. The boys had gotten on board, and the three of them would deem random things soulmates. The more ridiculous the better, though John and Sansa were pleased to have made the list. The fact that they'd ranked below Ghost and Lady hadn't ruined it for them. Snowmates, he suggested. She turned to him and her eyes widened, and then an adorable full laugh left her. It made him smile just to hear it, her eyes closing, and suddenly she went silent. She was laughing so hard. Wow, he chuckled, that really got you, huh? It really did. For some reason, she asked, the way Marcella would. Even her inflection was the same. Do you want a snow day? He asked her. She shook her head. No, I want to go to school. We're starting a new unit. I'm going to learn about the history of the North. That's cool, he agreed, White Walkers and stuff. She smiled. You're silly. They're real, okay, he teased. She giggled. They have blue eyes like you. Then her lips popped open, her eyes wide. Maybe you're one. Done, he grabbed hold of her. Will. Joey called, giggling as he picked her up, blanket and all. Your daddy is a White Walker. I knew it. Will shook his head. Uncle Goblin, guard Marcella. With that he crossed the room and pulled Joey out of his arms. The dogs had followed him, and made it difficult for him to actually get away, his grip staying on Joey, but slowly sinking down to his knees, the two of them laughing as the dogs sniffed and licked and tried to get in on the fun. Even when they were being silly, it was incredible to see who Will had become with her. He'd always been protective of JJ and Kitty, but it was as though Joey had activated some part of himself none of them had realized had been dormant. It had only increased after the incident with Ruger, and as they all got to know each other better. He curled in on her, her face tucked into his neck, spared from the rambunctiousness of the dogs. Joey. Will jostled her. He grinned. Joey. She started giggling against him but refused to answer. Will chuckled. Guess you need true love's kiss to revive you. With that, he lowered her to Grey Wind, who licked her from jaw to temple. Oh John, he heard from across the room. John had put on You've Really Got a Hold on Me, one of Marcella's favorite songs. Big mistake, he agreed. He forced himself to swallow, watching as she stood up, her golden hair moving back and forth, along with her hips. Her oversized sweater inched up, her yoga pants leaving nothing to the imagination. Even her fuzzy socks did nothing to deter the thoughts in his head or elsewhere, seeing a woman like her moving like that. Dance with me, she ordered John. Have we met? John asked. Will. Marcella smiled. Will blushed. Her eyes fell on him and he shook his head, grinning. I'm no one's third choice. She rolled her eyes and danced over to him, holding her hand out. Come on, it's almost over. Oh dance, please, Joey agreed with a starry smile. That is so unfair, he sighed, taking Marcella's hand and standing up. He spun her in a small circle and then pulled her towards him, his hand finding the small of her back as hers rested on his bicep. Up close he could see the flush on her cheeks, the fact that the purple hadn't entirely faded under her eyes, framed in her long lashes. He could smell her subtle perfume, and that she'd been sitting close to the fire. It was an easy beat to follow, and she was an easy partner to lead. Joey was looking up at them as she leaned against Will, her hand resting on Grey Wind so that he wouldn't bat at her for attention. The fire crackled, and the record player did a bit too, and the air, maybe. Just enough. She looked up at him with a soft smile. I'm going to twirl, and it's going to be dramatic. Are you ready for this, Stark? One would have thought he'd gotten used to this. She had not been kidding about the dance parties or the bores. One night, he and the boys had gone over for dinner, and Joey had a pink one wrapped around her neck, a purple one tied around her waist, singing into the TV remote. Marcella had jumped out, scaring the crap out of JJ, wearing an emerald green one around her neck. She'd then gone into a big box full of them and produced one for each of them. Him and the boys were not practiced at dance parties, or they hadn't been at the time, anyway, but they did well enough. In spite of everything she'd gone through on her own, and with Joey, Marcella had proved him right in what he'd told Will. At any chance she could, whenever it was appropriate, she tried to make life fun for Joey. Whether that was turning a ride to school into an adventure, or officially adopting that yapping cat who had wormed his way into their hearts, she never missed the opportunity. She'd always loved dancing. She'd been the girl doing pirouettes in his parents' foyer, and even if it was growing more and more difficult not to pull her closer, not to hold her tighter, he wouldn't miss an opportunity to make her happy either. "Do your worst, Baratheon," he urged. "Kill me just a little bit." It had become a bit of a habit. He'd found himself microdosing on her. When it started, he had no idea. Nevertheless, he couldn't help but savor the brief moments where they stood closer than necessary, when her jade eyes rested on him a moment too long, when she smiled at him over the messy tangle of their kids, like she couldn't remember being so content. As promised, it was a full-blown spin. Her golden hair fanned out around her, surrounding him in honeysuckle, her sweater billowed out, revealing the smallest sliver of skin. Grey Wind decided it was a great moment to stop her in her tracks, and he laid down on her foot as she turned. "Oh my," she squealed. He stumbled slightly but caught himself, and her too. His hand had moved up her back, and he could feel her heart beating through her sweater. "Apparently, I was not in fact ready for it," he joked, his nose inches from hers. She giggled breathlessly, her eyes on his. "Fooled me." "This is why people shouldn't dance," John said from across the room. He looked over at him. To anyone else he probably seemed like he was joking. He wasn't though, and his stomach knotted. He'd taken too much, indulged more than he ought to, and John had seen it. "Uncle Goblin?" Joey asked from where she was sitting on the floor. "Yeah, sweetheart," he asked. "Will you dance with me?" she wondered. Marcella bit her lip, trying not to laugh. John shook his head, but replied predictably, "Obviously." He watched as Joey got off the floor and pranced over to him. John offered her his hands and she slipped hers into them, stepping gently onto his feet. He looked down at her and she shook her head. "Not enough." John agreed. With that he swept her into his arms, swaying to the beat. She leaned her head on his shoulder as he spun her in a circle. He watched as Marcella swallowed thickly, looking at them, not just the tenderness of it he imagined, but the fact that she'd asked for it. Something she didn't need, but wanted all the same. In moments like this, it felt like Joey was maybe getting better for good. Like maybe they wouldn't have to look so hard, as though they'd ever stop. It was an ever-present nudge against all the wonderful moments. That fear, that one day they'd forget to ask, the time she most needed them to. El Sangza called from the kitchen. Marcella straightened up, calling back, "Yeah, babe. I think I messed up the cornbread," Sangza lamented. "It looks weird." He smirked and she smiled up at him, as though she ever messes anything up. Then called, "Coming." Whatever calamities Sangza imagined, were only that. They all sat down to dinner a few minutes later. He was sitting next to Sangza, with Kitty on his other side. She was being dramatic, saying that the chili was spicy, so that John would put more sour cream in it. He decided to do the same, and earned her giggle along with an extra dollop. Her and JJ were determined that they were going to get a snow day tomorrow. No amount of John's warning that the city wouldn't call it so early in the season, wanting to save them up for those long nights of January and February where the snow never ceased, did anything to deter their hopes of an elongated weekend. "Will they make you guys practice in this?" Sangza asked Will, who was in between her and Marcella. "Probably," Will nodded. "Yeah, I can't imagine they'd cancel with the championship coming up," John agreed, "especially since it could be snowing for that. How do you think you guys are gonna do?" Will shrugged, looking ambivalent and reticent the way he always did when football was mentioned. He looked between him and Joey, wondering if he needed to learn how to ask him better questions, too. He wasn't a complainer, whatsoever, but he felt as though he'd given him a million chances to be honest if he wanted to quit. And he hadn't. So maybe that was his answer. But he couldn't figure out why he'd want to continue something that he seemed too uninterested in. I think you're going to win, Will, Joey told him. He smirked and looked across at her. Oh yeah? The whole thing, huh? She nodded, trying to subtly feed Grey Wind a bite of cornbread. Will turned back to John. Guess we're gonna win it all. John nodded. Think you'll be at fullback? Feels like that's where you fit best this season. That's the good thing, as you get older you get to really stay at the positions you like. If he keeps playing, he cut in, wanting John to drop it. He felt Merciless eyes on him and then Song's and then finally John's. He shrugged, which he might not. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. John nodded, his eyes slightly wide. Yeah, of course. He asked Kitty something stupid then, he wasn't even entirely sure what. It changed the subject, though. They'd usually linger, but given how bad the snow seemed, he was pretty eager to get them all home. Merciless seemed to agree, because she hopped up as soon as everyone was done to start the dishes. Others started to rise too, but she said, I think me and Will can handle it, right? Will was never one to shirk at chores, but he was surprised by how eagerly he got up, taking Song's bowl and stacking it on top of his own. Merciless stacked a bunch and then opened the door with her hip, holding it for Will as he brought in some of the heavier things. JJ and Kitty wanted to play sequence, so he and Songza agreed to a quick game. At Kitty's behest, Joey got onto the chair along with her, the pair of them with widening eyes as they saw whatever cards they'd gotten. Songza won easily, even though he watched her try to draw it out. They no longer let the kids win, but they tried to at least make a game of it most of the time. JJ, Joe, why don't you guys get your snow stuff on, okay? I'm going to go check on Will and Mercilla, he told them. Songza said, tell her I can finish up. He shook his head, no, I have to live to drive us home. Her laughter followed him into the kitchen. Unsurprisingly, it was spotless. What was only slightly more surprising was that Will was sitting at the kitchen island, Mercilla standing in front of him, cupping his cheek in one hand as he nodded. He cleared his throat. Will straightened up when he saw him, but Mercilla didn't rush to turn in his direction, her hand moving to the back of Will's head to stroke his hair. You guys ready to go? Yeah, Mercilla agreed for them both. Will nodded too, and looked at Mercilla. She returned it, and whatever was in that look had Will letting out a breath and getting off the stool. I'll go make sure JJ and Joey are ready, he told them. Thanks, Will, he said stiffly. It came out more awkwardly than he would have hoped. But he felt more awkward than he wanted. He wasn't sure that Will had changed his original assessment of Mercilla, that she was weird, but he did know that whatever she was, he loved her. Both of the boys did. JJ followed her around like a little duckling, constantly showing off and doing bits to make her laugh. He didn't need to. She gave him affection and attention so freely, but there was no amount of it that was enough for him. Will was quieter about it, as he was about most things, but was no less steadfast in it. At first it had sort of seemed like he considered Mercilla an ally, someone on his team in looking out for Joey. But then it had morphed into being something distinct. So, it wasn't entirely unprecedented to walk in to find them deep in conversation, but even still this felt strange. And he typically didn't feel so on the outside, even if he was. He waited until Will was out of earshot before he asked, everything okay? Something going on with Joey? She looked at him as she folded a dish towel and said, no, everything with Joey is fine. His stomach churned at the specificity of that. She was a parent too though, and put him out of his misery quickly. Somewhat anyway. Everything is fine, he's fine, she promised, but you guys need to have a conversation. And, just, try not to guess the ending of it, okay? His brow furrowed, I don't understand. She nodded, I know, I'm sorry. It's something I have to try not to do with Joey. You know, if I get her to tell me that she's hungry, then my immediate thought is fix it, and so I suggest things, and so sometimes she's so quick to just agree or relieved not to have to tell me, that she agrees even if it's not really what she wants. She was kind to put that on herself, but he knew that she really meant that he went into fix-it mode. He was working on it, but it was hardwired within him. Okay, he agreed, though in his mind he was already thinking of things it could be about. They'd had the talk last year which had been super uncomfortable, and Will had been so eager to be done with it that he'd asked literally no questions, but maybe now that he was in 6th grade, in middle school, he had more. A part of him wondered if he was going to tell him he was gay, but the way Will had walked into a car when a girl in his class, Sadie, had waved at him last week made him think no. Bisexual, maybe. If that was the case, then it really was a non-issue, except making sure that Will himself was okay with it. His response though was pretty automatic. I love you and everything that you are and every version of you that you will be, and nothing will ever change that, least of all who it is you may eventually love. Though his answer to anything Will could say to him was I love you and everything that you are and every version of you that will be, and nothing will ever change that, which in some ways made everything a little simpler. Besides, though he knew Marcella took her relationships with the boys very seriously, she would never hide something from him if Will were in trouble, and he knew that she'd give him a warning if she were afraid what his reaction would be. Which she kind of had. When they went over to the foyer, John, Sangza and Kitty were standing talking to the kids, who were all bundled up, all of their things together. He looked at Will, who was standing somewhat in front of both Joey and JJ, as though he was ready to reach out and grab one of them if they went to stray. What's going on with you, baby? He couldn't help but wonder about his child, who seemed to always know the right thing to do and chose to do it for that reason alone. They all said their thank yous, and John promised they'd drop off Marcella's car in the morning, and they were heading out into the snow. Joey held the railing and Will's arm as she walked down, and Marcella walked behind her, one hand on the railing, one out in case her daughter was going to fall. Grey Wind and JJ ran ahead, the former rolling in the snow and getting himself nice and wet for the drive home. JJ tried to make a snowball but determined it too soft and as such that they would in fact have school tomorrow, which made him lose a bit of his enthusiasm. They got Joey's seat out of Marcella's car and into his. She convinced Will to sit in the front and got in the middle of JJ and Joey. Everyone was quiet on the way home, the way he and the boys often were after a long day with everyone. The snow wasn't bad yet, but he was still glad that he'd decided to drive them. Joey was asleep by the time they got back. He had the boys and Grey Wind head into the house, and he pulled Joey out of the car to carry her back for Marcella. Chatty is going to be so mad, she told him as they walked. You know I have no sympathy for you when it comes to this, he reminded her. She laughed. I know I brought it on myself by bringing a demon into my household. You've made yourself very clear. Oh, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. What's up? He asked. So, the gallery has an exhibition opening this Thursday, from 7-9, she said. We'd love to have Joey, he told her. She smiled. Oh, thanks, but well actually, I was going to see if you wanted to come. I mean, it's no big deal or anything, and I get it if your sitter can't stay or... Oh, he couldn't help but grin. Yeah, no, I definitely want to come. I don't know anything about art. There won't be a quiz, she promised. But seriously, it's no big deal if you can't make it. I can make it, he told her, and it's okay if it is a big deal to you. She turned to him as they got to her front steps. It is kind of. It would mean a lot to me if you came. That means a lot to me, he admitted. Her honesty always beckoned his. She'd told him once it was just another way of him trying to protect her. Not letting her be vulnerable on her own. It sounded like she'd spoken to her therapist about it. He wasn't sure that was the case. In some ways, he just didn't want to be a coward. What are you doing with Joey? He asked. Marcella laughed. Then, John is going to come and watch her. He nodded. He's not cool enough for an invite, then. She grinned. No, he got an invite, but he asked if he could support me by hanging out with his bestie, his word, not mine, rather than a bunch of, and once again I'm quoting, faux intellectuals who will mistake his man bun as a conversation starter. He chuckled. Sounds like John. Providing unconditional support through ignoring other people is kind of his sweet spot. Sangza's coming to help set up at the gallery though, so I think Bran is watching Kitty. I don't know, it's a whole revolving door. But you'll at least know 2 people, she told him. I can handle myself, he grinned. Some people even find me charming. Most people, I'd wager, she offered easily. I just felt sorry for you because you don't have a man bun to start conversations with faux intellectuals. He chuckled. Somehow, I'll manage. They headed up the stairs and he transferred Joey to her arms and said goodnight. The boys had achieved picking their snacks for tomorrow's lunch but little else, so he got JJ ready for bed and read to him from the graphic novel they were reading together for a little while. He told him he could stay up and read for a bit on his own if he read from something else, and kissed him goodnight before heading down the hall to Will's room. He knocked once and Will called for him to come in, so he did. Will was dressed for bed too, though he didn't have to be in bed until closer to 9. "Hey," he greeted him, "can we talk?" "Yeah," Will agreed, pulling back his covers. "Is everything okay?" "I was sort of going to ask you that," he admitted. He walked over and sat down on his bed, as Will got in under the covers. He fiddled with his bedside lamp, even though the overhead light was on, and he squinted as Will shone it too bright and then watched as he dimmed it before finally giving up and turning it off, seemingly understanding that it had taken up as much time as it could. "What did Ella tell you?" Will asked. "Nothing," he promised. As much as he wanted Will to come to him for everything, it was important to him that he knew he could trust her, that even if he felt like he couldn't bring something to him, that he knew he didn't have to deal with anything on his own. "We were talking a little, in the kitchen after dinner," Will told him. "She's I don't know. I always find it really easy to tell her my stuff," he noted. "Feels like she sort of gets it without making it about her." "Yeah," Will agreed, "it does feel like that kind of. And like, she never makes me feel dumb even when she doesn't agree with me." "I don't know. Do I?" He wanted to ask, but her advice was still ringing in his head. "I'm glad you have her to talk to," he told him honestly. "I just hope you know you can always talk to me too. It's not that you always have to, but you always can, so if there's anything you wanted to tell me, like I don't know, maybe what you guys were talking about tonight, you could do that." Will was picking at his bedspread now, and he fought the urge to smooth his hand over his. "We were talking about football," Will told the quilted pattern. "Yeah, she's got a lot of thoughts about your team's defense," he teased, hoping he could lighten the mood. Will smirked. "I don't think she knows that our team has a defense." He chuckled, because as loyal a fan as Marcella was, he had never met anyone less capable of understanding football. Joey had to explain something to her the other day, and did it so well that him and John did a double take. He nodded and Will took a deep breath. "I was asking, well, she's kind of brought it up before, but after dinner tonight she told me I should just tell you. This is it, he's finally going to tell me he wants to quit," he thought. Will looked up at him and he could tell the courage it took to do so, and told him instead, "I love it, Dad." Of all the things in the world he'd imagined Will saying to him tonight, this had not even been near the list. He was dumbfounded, and silent. Which was maybe for the best, because he might have guessed the ending otherwise, but he was so mute that Will went on. "And I know you don't like it and I'm sorry, but I do, and I want to keep playing and I want to go to the camp next summer and I'm sorry," he said. He shook his head, finally able to at least ask, "Why are you sorry?" "Well, I don't know," Will shrugged, "liking it, I guess. Or maybe lying. I don't know, I explained it to Ella better." "Well, we'll talk about the lying, though I'm not sure that what you know, let's put a hold on that." He shook his head. "Will, you never have to apologize for loving anything." "But you don't want me to play," Will told him. His stomach churned, realizing how absolutely fucked he was as a parent. He was so sure, so certain that he was doing the right thing, the thing other dads didn't do, by telling Will it was okay not to play football or any sport. By not trying to force that on him. But instead he'd made him feel guilty for loving something as innocent as a game. "Baby, I didn't want you to play because you seemed to dislike it so much, and I was afraid that you were doing it because you thought you should, not because you wanted to," he told him. And then figured his son's honesty deserved some of his own, too. "I have my own stuff with football. It was a lot of pressure put on me from when I was younger than you are now. And I got really wrapped up in not wanting to let anyone down, and later in high school, in enjoying being good at something even if I didn't enjoy the game itself. And now it's tough because a lot of people still think of me only in relation to something that I ended up resenting a lot. Then realized, sorry, I'm making this about me, huh?" Will grinned. "No, it's okay. It's kind of cool to know that you were that good, huh?" "I was that great," he teased, making Will laugh. "But that's how I feel about it for me. and I'm so sorry that I let that make you feel like you couldn't show me how much you love it. It's okay, Will said and shrugged. I think it is kind of like you said though, like the responsibility. Like I knew you wouldn't be mad at me, I just thought it'd be easier. He nodded. Did you still feel like it was easier the 35th time that I told you that you could quit? Will smiled. No, but up until that 34th time it was smooth sailing. He chuckled. Yeah, I bet. Will, I need you to remember something. Will nodded solemnly. I'm not saying I want this to happen. Really. I'm so happy for you to have something you love doing, and God, you're really good at it. But if you ever do stop loving it, you need to remember that's okay, too. Sometimes things get out of hand, and we find ourselves so far into something that it feels impossible to get out of, but it never is. You can change your mind, and you can ask for help. Always. Will nodded. That's what Ella said. That made sense, because he was thinking of her when he said it. Did she? He asked though. Yeah, Will smiled. Did you tell her, too? Because she said you taught her that. Chapter 13. Summary. Hey. I hope the drop in comments on the last chapter wasn't indicative of people not liking it. This was a hard chapter to write. I'd had a part of it appear fully formed, but it ended up feeling really not good within the rest of the story, so I had to rewrite it, which is something I don't typically do. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter text. He was looking at the email for the 5th time, but he still couldn't seem to make any sense of it. He knew the words, understood the language as needlessly stylized as it was, but still couldn't quite grasp what he was reading. His phone buzzed on his desk and he saw it was Castle. Are you seeing this? He answered. Castle guffawed into the phone. No, I'm calling you because I miss you. He smirked. It was possible. His heart was beating rapidly in his chest, his ears ringing as he read through the email once again. Do you think this was Tywin? If you told me Tywin Lannister had single-handedly rigged the election and the World Series, I would believe you, Castle said, but maybe we're just really good at our jobs. He knew he was good at his job, but he doubted it had anything to do with the email they'd just received from Janos Slynt. Things had calmed with Myrcilla's case as they prepared for the official hearing. A part of him suspected that Lewyn had set the date out by a few months less to give him and Slynt time to prepare and more to give Myrcilla a bit of respite. He was the sort of judge that would do that, someone who believed in mercy as much as justice. He had been a little afraid when he'd heard the date and first thought of it, thinking that maybe Lewyn was giving her this time having sole custody of Joey because she wouldn't in the long run. He had been more than a little afraid actually, and did a deep dive review of Lewyn's cases that included incidents of spousal abuse, which made him feel a bit more reassured that they hadn't already lost. They had been building their case, sending Slynt's team different things every week, trying to keep up a constant assault. Gendry didn't seem like the type of guy to go down with one blow, and so they were taking the death by 1,000 cuts approach, hoping to stab enough in him that they'd just eventually bleed out. Which admittedly, could be what was happening here. The crux of the email is that Slynt was suggesting that rather than go to trial, they make a deal. For everything. His first thought was that Myrcilla had finally brought her grandfather into the loop, and he'd made it clear that it would be dealt with quietly and efficiently. He couldn't imagine that Tywin would risk transcripts from the hearing being leaked to the press, and with Myrcilla's family name and Gendry's profile, that could very easily happen. She hadn't said anything to him, though. But he wondered if she would. She always told him that she had absolute faith in him, taking his advice to heart, and maybe she thought that this was undercutting that, bringing in a pinch hitter. He hoped not. In general, he tried to keep his ego out of this kind of stuff, but particularly in her case. There was no amount of his pride or anything else that he wouldn't give for Myrcilla and Joey to be safe and rid of Gendry forever. Let's wait a day, Castle said, and craft a response. I don't want them thinking we're as eager for this as they are, because we're not. Yeah, he agreed. Plus I need to talk to Myrcilla to see if she's open to it. Castle was silent for a moment, which suggested he was going to get another lecture about objectivity. At this point objectivity could go fuck itself, but he kept his mouth shut. You have to make her open to it, Castle told him. He read the email again, his stomach knotting. What do you think they'll ask for? If I had to guess, partial custody, Castle noted. He doesn't give a shit about Joey, he argued. How many of the things people fight about in divorces do they actually care about? Castle pointed out. He's going to hit her where it hurts. He winced at Castle's choice of words, swallowing the bile he always tasted when he thought of Gardry's hands on Myrcella. It'll be a non-starter, Rob noted. Castle sighed. I would hope so. That poor girl has been through too much already. He thought at first he was talking about Joey, but then he went on, she won't survive losing her daughter half the time, especially not to him. So she's not going to. So much for objectivity. Castle had tried his best, and done a pretty good job at first, but Myrcella didn't make it easy, or even possible, to resist her. He'd be her loyal old general until the day he died. It didn't stop him from keeping him on task though. Yeah, he agreed, I'll talk to her tonight. They talked for a little and then he closed his computer and left the office. Because he was going to be at Myrcella's gallery the next night, he wanted to have some extra time with the boys. Their nanny looked very relieved when he arrived, but whether that was because she had a paper due or because of the state the boys were in he didn't know. JJ was bouncing off the walls. He'd had a playdate that afternoon, and his friends' parents apparently didn't believe in moderating their sugar intake. His mouth had a red stain all over it which he learned was either from fruit punch or gushers, and he was running around with his shirt off his body anyway, as it was tied around his head. Typically he'd try to calm him down, but he needed to burn it off, so he set his timer on his phone and JJ raced against himself for about 30 minutes. Grey wind lasted about 10 of them before laying down directly in JJ's path so that he'd have to hop over him on every lap. Will was on the opposite end of the spectrum, holed up in his room with flashcards for a geography test he had the next day. He offered to test him, but Will said he wasn't ready for help yet, whatever that meant. Knowing that JJ's impending sugar crash and Will's test-related stress were both recipes for dinner-time meltdowns, he chose the path of least resistance and made the sloppy joes, which were now regularly requested by both of them. He made a salad too, dressing it with Myrcella's salad dressing, and then called them both down when it was all ready. He didn't bother making JJ put his shirt back on, in all honesty that would have only doomed it, but he did make Will put aside his flashcards at least to eat. Why are you studying geography? JJ asked. Because I have a test, Will told him as he shoveled food into his mouth. Slow down a bit, he urged, or you'll get those burps again. Will smirked. That was a long night. No, JJ clarified, what is the point of studying geography? You can just Google it. You can just Google most things, Will pointed out. You still have to learn them. But that's stupid, JJ reasoned, grumbling, and such a waste of time. Oh my god. Dad, am I gonna have to learn the capitals when I'm Will's age? He nodded, probably. JJ rolled his eyes, but then cocked his head. Hey, did you know that Myrcella knows all the capitals in alphabetical order? I did not know that, he told him. JJ winced sympathetically, as though he felt terrible for him for not being in Myrcella's confidences quite like he was. She said she'd teach me, there's a song or something, JJ went on. Will, you should have asked her. She helped make my flashcards, Will reminded him. And you only know about the song because she was telling me about it, remember? Before he could tell him to watch the attitude, JJ said, oh, right. Then told him, Joey B, what did she do to your cards? Bedazzled them, Will said with a sigh. That piqued his curiosity and he picked up the flashcards. As noted, while the handwriting was Will's, there were little curlicues and designs in the glitter gel pens that Sansa had gotten for Joey so that she didn't have to wait for Myrcella to be able to have sparkles on her drawings. Very nice, he noted. Will smiled. She said it would make me happier while I was studying. Does it? He asked. He shrugged. Not really, but who cares? They must have made them last week when Myrcella watched the boys after school one day. Every time she had them they came back with entirely new lore. She and Joey liked to let them in on their current obsessions, whether it was a certain kind of cookie, or a song they couldn't stop listening to, or any other random thing. That would mean that for the next week in the car on the way to school they'd have one thing and one thing only on, until the next time they went over. He nodded, though he sort of doubted Will felt that way. If he had to guess, he would say that it did make him a little happier when he was studying, not because he cared about glitter or gel pens, but because Joey had done it expressly to make him happy. That was how he felt, Anyway, every time he was on a call he didn't want to be on in his office and he looked at the drawing she'd made him. By the time they finished up dinner, JJ had crashed hard and after getting him showered and into pajamas he got him into bed early and he'd conked out before the light was even shut off. He went back downstairs and saw Will on the couch with Grey Wind, resting the note cards he'd gone through in different piles on Grey Wind's back. Hand them over, he urged, and Will gave him the stack. He took a look at them and asked, "How did Merciless song go?" Will smirked, "It's to the tune of Oh I Want You Back. She said she learned it in school but I asked Auntie Sangza and she had no idea what I was talking about." "Yeah, I'd bet this house on the idea that she made it up as a studying tool," he laughed. He tested Will for a little bit. Turns out he definitely was ready to be tested, and the stack of the ones that he got wrong only had 3 cards in them. Will made him integrate them back in and go through it again, and that time he got them all right. "Okay, I think you need to be done for the night," he urged him. "If you want, I'll test you one more time at breakfast." Will agreed and set the cards down on the table. He turned on the television for him, and he chose repeats of a show they sometimes watched together. "Look, I need to go talk to Mercilla quickly. Are you good staying with JJ? Maybe it could be practice for tomorrow night," Will suggested. He should have known this was going to come up. Will was insistent that he was old enough to look after himself and JJ. Considering he didn't have a car and was 11, he understood the need for a nanny to be their transportation, but otherwise, he really wanted to babysit. So far, he hadn't given in. He knew that Will was responsible enough, he just couldn't quite seem to get over the idea of them in the house on their own for an extended period of time. He definitely didn't want the first time to be at night though, and really when he left them on their own for the first time, he wanted to choose a day when Mercilla was around in case of an emergency. "It can definitely be practice, just not for tomorrow night," he reasoned. Will sighed but nodded without further discussion. He grabbed his coat and made sure his cell was turned on high volume and then headed out. The walk was quick, but he was grateful for his coat. The snow had stopped on Monday morning. It only lasted long enough to make school drop-off a nightmare, but the cold had set in, so it crunched underneath his feet, more ice than snow at this point. Maybe it was that which made their house look especially warm. He grabbed the bag of salt at the bottom of their stairs and poured some on each step as he went up, before going and knocking on the door. Jumping back slightly when a cat flung itself at the window next to the door, Mercilla appeared in the hall a moment later, waving at him. She bent down and picked up Chatty with one hand, opening the door with the other. Before she could get a word in, the cat was yelling at him. "I have nothing to say to you," he told him, as he scratched him behind the ears. They had come to a quiet accord, but Chatty had taken to taunting him, making direct eye contact with him when he snuggled with one of the boys, purring obscenely. "What about to me?" Mercilla asked. He nodded. "Lots to say to you. Is now an okay time?" "I was just about to put Joey to bed," she told him, "but if you can." "Mo Rob," Joey said as she ran into the hall in footy pajamas. "Hi honey," he smiled at her. Then told Mercilla, "I can wait, if that's okay." She nodded, her eyes wandering over his face as though searching for signs of tragedy. "Everything's okay. Just need to run something by you." "Mommy, can Rob read to me?" Joey asked. Mercilla, looking down at Joey, gave him the opportunity to look at her. She looked tired, or something. Unfortunately for him, that didn't make her look any less beautiful. In fact, the sight of her golden hair falling out of her ponytail only made him want to slip it out of his elastic entirely, and grasp it in his hands. Which was why he jumped at the opportunity to focus on her daughter instead of her, so he said, "If you'll help me with the big words." Joey looked at him with wide eyes and then giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Okay. I might stay down here and clean up a bit then, if that's okay?" Mercilla asked. He looked down at Joey, who said to him, "I have to brush my teeth before we read." Mercilla bit her lip to stop herself from laughing and he nodded solemnly, "We can do that." She was such a rule follower, like Will. JJ still fought against brushing his teeth every night. Mercilla handed him Chatty, and hugged Joey goodnight, promising to check on her before she went to bed. She did laugh then when she saw the pose Chatty had made in his hands, as though he was torturing him, and saved them both by taking him back. "Will you carry me?" Joey asked him. He scrunched his nose, I don't knock. She giggled quietly as he lifted her, wrapping her arms and legs around him, her head on his shoulder. He felt Marcella following behind them until he got to the stairs, and then felt her hand on his back briefly, a gentle stroke of thanks. When they got upstairs he brought Joey into her bathroom and set her down. She pulled her step stool over to the sink and got on while he put some toothpaste onto her toothbrush for her and ran it under the water. Thank you, she nodded as she took it from him and started to brush. He had watched kids make a meal out of things to avoid bed. Kitty was an all-time great. She could stretch out anything so skillfully you hardly realized you were being played until it was 45 minutes after she was supposed to be in bed. Will had done it too when he was younger in a manner that could only be described as malicious compliance. There was no whining, no conniving, only the subtle but impactful stretching of tasks that of course he wanted done. Reorganizing one of his school folders or putting away every last bit of Legos so that no one would trip over them. Which perhaps was why he eyed Joey suspiciously. She of all the kids was the most capable of deception, and she was brushing her teeth within an inch of their little lives. Joey looked up at him guilelessly though, before thoughtfully returning back to her task. With a mouth half full of toothpaste she asked, what flavor is your toothpaste? Toothpaste flavor, he guessed. But is it cinnamon or peppermint or winter fresh? That's what mommy uses, but it's not a real flavor, she told him, wrinkling her nose, it's spicy though. I think mine is also winter fresh, he answered, smiling at the idea of toothpaste being spicy. And you're right. That's not a real flavor. She nodded and kept brushing. What flavor is yours? He asked. Kids mint, she told him, I don't like the fruit or bubble gum flavors. It came out sort of garbled because her mouth was now full of toothpaste. Even though he'd understood, he said, what was that? Bubble gum, she responded, trying to enunciate, not good. He chuckled, do you want to spit some of that out? In a minute, she nodded, and kept brushing. He watched her, the toothpaste practically foaming. He must have looked incredulous because when she looked up at him again, she sputtered out a laugh, toothpaste dribbling, oops. He laughed and wet a washcloth as she spit the rest out into the sink, rinsing her brush and putting it back in the holder. Give me that face, he urged. She presented it and he rid her of toothpaste and looked at it. Oh, it's so beautiful, he said before rubbing the washcloth over her again and pulled away. Oh my goodness, how'd you get like that? Mommy, she smiled, as though it were obvious. He nodded, because it was, you're right about that. She took the hand that he offered her and hopped off the stool before leading him into her room. He pulled back the covers for her and she got in. To his surprise, there were no stuffed animals in bed with her. He'd never really noticed that before. Maybe she just didn't need one though, because a moment later Chatty came into her room already ranting about something and hopped up in bed with her. Joey laid down, turning on her side, Chatty curling up above her head, his tail swishing at her face making her giggle. He sat down on the floor beside her bed, so they were at eye level, and went to grab the top book off her nightstand. Would it be okay if we read that one? She pointed to the one below it. Mommy is so excited for what happens next in this one. He tried not to smile at that, but he couldn't help but think about when JJ was going to continue reading after they'd read their normal 2 chapters a night, and he'd make him promise to read something else so as not to miss out on whatever they were reading together. It surprised him the way he got invested, and honestly made him feel a little silly, so it felt good knowing that Marcella did too. Yeah, of course. He picked up the other book and opened it to where the bookmark was holding her place. He gestured to it, wanting to at least understand the basics, so he asked, anything I should know? Instead of telling him anything about the book though, she said, Mommy is sad. He looked over at her and saw a blush on her cheeks and a worried look in her eye. He closed the book and set it down and then rested his forearm on the bed and his chin on top of it. I'm sorry to hear that, he told her. Do you know why she's sad? She shook her head. No. She pretended she wasn't. She pretended she was happy. She made up a new game to play at dinner. But she smiled like this. With that, Joey smiled widely, scrunching her eyes closed. He knew that smile. It had always rung false to him too. John's eyes crinkled often instead of smiling, a surer sign of his affection or amusement than any laugh. This was different though. It was like she was trying to hide her eyes for fear that you'd see the truth in them. He didn't want to burden Joey and he was certain that Myrcella didn't either, but he also felt strongly that it was important between everything that happened with Gardry, and everything that happened with Ruger, and all the work they'd been doing to get Joey to voice her concerns, that her feelings never be dismissed. I know the smile you're talking about, honey, and I agree. I think it's a smile she does when she isn't happy but is trying really hard to be, he explained. Joey's brow knit and said, but isn't that a lie? I'm not supposed to lie about my feelings. That's what Mommy said. The night of the incident at school, Myrcella had asked him if she'd passed something down to Joey to make her a target for that sort of cruelty. He had meant it when he told her that she hadn't, not really. But she had passed down, or taught her inadvertently, how to deceive those closest to her. Joey had learned the tricks of it from Myrcella, so of course she could see the edges of it when Myrcella used them on her. I know, honey, and that's really important, he told her, because it helps your mommy take care of you, it helps all of us. Joey asked, does she lie to you? To me, he wondered. He wasn't sure exactly why she was asking that, but he thought about it anyway. He hadn't seen that scrunch-eyed smile in some time. No, not anymore. That's good, Joey yawned, that makes it easier for you to take care of her. He was immobile for a moment. He had no idea what to say or do. A part of him wondered if Will had said something to her, but he couldn't imagine it. His son had brought it up to him more than once. In fact, they'd gotten into an argument about it a couple of weeks back when he'd had a date. He had thought Will was okay with him dating, and apparently he was, as long as the person he was dating was Myrcella. When he'd explained that wasn't going to happen, Will had very uncharacteristically slammed his door as though he was not dating her specifically to punish him. Even still, he couldn't imagine that he would say anything about it to JJ or Joey. That didn't mean that they didn't see things, though. Things that he was doing, that he couldn't seem to stop himself from doing. Joey didn't seem upset about it though, or confused. She said it like it was obvious, the way JJ might have told someone that his dad was a lawyer. This is Rob, she might introduce him, he takes care of my mommy. He knew that he should have contradicted her, explained that Myrcella took care of herself. She did, sometimes he felt like he was barely on the sidelines cheering her on. He couldn't quite bring himself to correct her, though. Because the way she seemed to mean it was that he looked out for her, that he paid attention to her, that he'd do anything for her. And they really weren't supposed to lie about the way they felt. Besides, it seemed to bring Joey some amount of comfort. And there was nothing he wouldn't do to achieve that. He loved this little girl in a way that he couldn't even begin to fathom. If there was anything he could do to make her feel better or more secure, he would do it. Yeah, honey, it does make it a lot easier, he agreed, then lifted the book. Do you want to read? She shook her head. Would you tell me a mommy story? That's what Auntie Sangza does when she tucks me in. Well, if Auntie Sangza does it, he rolled his eyes, making Joey giggle. He and John had made it very clear how they felt about Joey's obvious favoritism towards Sangza. He thought about stories, wondering if she'd want one from when Myrcella was her age or older. Oh, have you heard the one about Bran's homecoming? What's a homecoming? Joey asked. It's this dance that happens in the fall, around a big football game, he explained. Bran didn't play football, and he wasn't one much for dances. He was more into different kinds of stuff. Like what? Joey asked. Like studying and doing all this crazy stuff on the computer. He was too advanced then for me to understand it, and he had a really good couple of friends but otherwise kind of kept to himself, he explained. But right before his sophomore year he started dating a girl in the summer and he was besotted, she asked. The way she said it made it sound like a vocabulary word she'd just learned, or a word that she and Myrcella had come across when reading and she'd learned the definition of. Exactly, honey, he nodded. He was besotted. His girlfriend really wanted to go to the dance, so Bran of course decided to take her. He bought the tickets, and because our mom was gone, and Sangza was at university, your mommy went suit shopping with Bran and my dad. She took them to the florist to pick out flowers to get for his date. All of it. Was my mommy going to the dance too? She asked. Oh yeah, he agreed, she was in the running to become homecoming queen. Joey's eyes widened at that and he chuckled. She was going to get a crown and everything, but then, disaster struck. Bran's girlfriend broke up with him 2 days before homecoming. Why? Joey asked. Bran is so nice. He stroked her cheek. Yeah, that was kind of your mommy's reaction too. Bran was planning to stay home and sulk. What do you think your mommy thought of that? Not on her watch. Joey suggested with a confident smile. He laughed. Exactly. Not on her watch. So your mommy told the guy that she was meant to go with that she was very sorry but that something very important came up. Instead of going with him she went over to our house, all dressed up in her gown. Did she look beautiful? Joey asked. He remembered seeing pictures, but even if he hadn't, he would have been confident saying, of course she did. She's always beautiful, but even more than that she is sweet, just like someone else I know. Joey's eyes widened and pointed to herself. He nodded and she giggled. She brought Bran as her date, and to the parties afterwards, and instead of sulking he ended up having a really great night because of your mommy. Did she become the queen? She asked. Nope, she didn't. He shook his head, but I don't think she was all that upset about it. If I had to guess, I bet she had a lot more fun with Bran than she would have had with her other date. Joey's brow furrowed. But what about him? Her other date? Didn't he get left without someone? Oh, he had never really thought about it. I don't know. Then called, Elle. Yeah, she called back from downstairs. What happened to your original date to homecoming senior year? He yelled. There was no answer, but a few moments later, she appeared in Joey's doorway. What? She asked. What happened to the guy you were meant to go to homecoming with when you went with Bran instead? He clarified. Her brow furrowed and she said, he took a good friend of mine, one homecoming king, and they are married now. He turned back to Joey and said, so I guess we won't waste time feeling sorry for him, will we? Joey giggled, no. Myrcella crossed her arms, leaning against the doorway. Are you two gossiping about me? Yes, he and Joey said at once. This caused Joey to giggle once again and he looked at Myrcella and saw her giving her daughter a scrunchy-eyed smile. It made his heart hurt, knowing she was sad enough that something that typically would have made her laugh couldn't. Knowing that Joey knew what it meant. I think it's time for bed, honey, he told her, setting the unused book on top of her night table. She nodded happily. She must have not seen Myrcella's fake smile. Joey lifted off the bed and wrapped her arms around his neck, so he hugged her back. Night, Rob, she yawned. Love you. She'd never said that to him before, but she said that too like it was obvious, like it was so a part of her that it didn't need any big declaration. Like it always had been. So he tried not to make a meal of it when he cupped the back of her head and said, love you too. Sleep tight, honey. Once she'd resettled on the bed, he pulled the covers up to her chin and turned out the light beside her bed. Myrcella was still standing in the doorway, and she shut out the overhead light as he walked towards her. They walked in silence down the stairs, and settled onto the couch. As he always did when he sat in this room, he looked at the walls. It had been an understatement when Myrcella had asked if she could hang some things up. There was an entire wall they called their gallery. It was filled with pictures Joey had drawn that Myrcella had professionally matted and framed. Every time he was over there were more. Some of them were particularly good, but others they liked for different reasons: a very happy-looking sun, or a bunch of dots that somehow ended up looking like a tornado from far away. He knew there was a lesson there, that something didn't have to be perfect to be worthy. Not for the first time, he wished that Myrcella would practice what she preached. Are you all right? He asked her. She glanced at him in surprise and then schooled her expression and then smoothed it, shaking her head. He had caught her off guard, and she had begun to decide to lie, and then stopped herself. Not really, she admitted. I mean, I'm fine, nothing has happened. Today was just a really hard therapy session. He nodded. I'm sorry. She winced. Was it really that obvious? He liked to think if he'd spent more time with her he would have noticed, but he explained. Joey mentioned something. Her face contorted in concern. What did she say? Should I go talk to her? I tried to hide it. I think that was the problem, Elle, he explained. You have a bit of a tell, and she picked up on it. Her eyes widened and he explained, when your eyes scrunch when you smile. It's fake, isn't it? His fingers were at the side of her eyes. They didn't have to be. She knew where they were. It was things like this that he couldn't seem to stop doing. Yes, she admitted, her cheek catching his fingers and rubbing against them slightly. It was things like this that he didn't know if she realized she was doing. He shook his head, I am not saying this to make you feel bad, but she knows when you're doing it that you're lying to her, and with you trying so hard to get her to be honest about her feelings. Myrcella closed her eyes and nodded, this is why I'm a terrible driver. He was so surprised that he couldn't even think to tease, so you admit it. She opened her eyes and smiled, I overcorrect. The smile died and she swallowed, my mother never hid anything from me. She'd never cover it up when my father hit her. She'd drink too much and tell me things I shouldn't know. And I understand how unhappy she had to have been to do that, how unfair it was that he did that to her, that he was in the wrong. But a part of me wishes she had shielded me from it, just a little. I just want to keep all that pain away from her. I always have. I just want to protect her, and I'm fucking her up instead. I know what you mean. She looked at him and he shrugged, the football thing with Will. I overcorrected hard. I was thinking about that earlier, she nodded. Talking about it actually. In therapy. You were, he asked. You talk about me. Of course I do, she told him. Just guess I was thinking about it a lot. You and Will and, well, just how he did something against your expectations and how beautifully you handled it. I don't know, it was so easy to tell Will to talk to you about it. It's something we talk about a lot. Getting better at identifying different kinds of love. Understanding what it looks like when a love is actually unconditional, as opposed to one that is discussed as such to better wield it as a weapon. She looked at him and said, even when you were mad at me when I first got back, you loved me. Right? Yes, he promised easily. At the time I didn't understand it, even though I felt it. I just knew I could come to you. And it wasn't until sort of dissecting my other relationships, with my family and whatnot, that I really grasped it, she explained. I guess what I'm saying is, you may think you're fucking Will up, but you're not. He didn't want to upset you or disappoint you. I think a lot of those fears trace back to Roslyn. But even if he couldn't explain it, he knows that it's different. He knows there's nothing he could ever say or do that would make you withhold love from him. He knows it's unconditional even if he doesn't have the right words yet. She took hold of his hand in between hers, I promise you that he knows. He couldn't really speak, so he raised their hands to his lips and pressed a chaste kiss of acknowledgement against her knuckle. He has the words, he told her finally. She looked at him and he explained, he said them about you actually. In comparison to Roslyn. When you first got back, he was pretty fascinated by you and he asked about you leaving Gardry and bringing Joey with you. He'd already guessed what Gardry was like and so I told him that you wouldn't leave Joey with him. And he said that you would have taken her with you anyway. Because you're just that kind of mom. You helped him find the words, even if he didn't understand it. In that moment, whether he saw it or not, he was saying that Roslyn left him because of her, not because of him. You showed him that. You may worry that you're overcorrecting on some things, and yeah, maybe you are, but you are setting such a good example, not just for Joey, but for my boys too. And I don't think I've really thanked you for that the way I should. Her hands gripped his, her eyes flooding with tears, you don't have to thank me. I'm sorry, I've been holding these in all day. I'm so glad he was able to see that. I don't understand how any mother could leave her children, and I hate her for doing it. I really have so much hate in my heart for her. But I can't help but just feel sorry for her too, for whatever it is within her that allowed her to do it, because she is missing out on them. I didn't know what I was missing before I knew them. I couldn't. I just don't think I could live without them now, I really don't. She had made Will feel it, JJ too, though he didn't understand it. He just knew that he felt better when he was around it. Craved her attention above nearly all others, became gluttonous for it. But Will, he imagined, did understand it. And it made him sorry for arguing with him about her. Because of course it was more than that she was beautiful, and that she made him laugh, and that he would do goofy things to make her laugh. At the start, Will hadn't understood why he would date anyone else when Myrcella was around. Now, though, he didn't want him to date anyone else because Myrcella was around. He wanted them to be together to solidify what it was that Ursula had already made him feel. That she loved him and that he could rely on her and that she'd never leave him behind. It was a little like the way Joey just seemed to understand that he'd always take care of Ursula. "I'd say you have no idea what that means to me, but you do," he told her. "I know that you do. But I'm not as good as you. When I think of Gaudry missing out on Joey, it makes me happy." She smiled sadly. "That's not entirely surprising. What is surprising is that you've resisted calling John to brag that she told you she loves you." He chuckled, but admitted, "I hadn't even considered it. I kind of just want to hold on